Release that witch eye by Ermu. Chapter 661, The Star Cyclone. Is this magic power? The twirling cyclone on the man's forehead immediately reminded Roland of Nightingale's description about the form of magic power, but seeing it now for himself, he thought it was more like a galaxy. Several spiral arms were revolving around the nexus, the brightest point which was located in the center. Despite that it was only about a palm size, when he carefully looked at it, he could notice numerous details and felt some surging power in it. Are you a martial fighter? The man suddenly opened his mouth to ask in a hoarse voice. No, I'm not. Roland was fully alerted. Yeah, I guess so. The burnt-faced man turned his body toward Roland without moving his head at all. You taste sweeter. Roland looked for weakness in the man's body while saying, if you were a girl, I might be a bit interested in hearing these words. Are you a man bit by the magic power? No, force of nature? Force of nature? The burnt-faced man snorted contemptuously. They've no idea where this power came from and knew nothing about its essence. Don't talk as if you know everything. Roland retorted. Thinking, come on, this is my dream. The man opened his mouth, which was full of bleeding blisters, to say, I can't tell, but I can feel it. It doesn't belong to this world. It's a gift from the deities. I thought the hijacker could attract at least 1 or 2 martial fighters to come here, but he surrendered too fast. Fortunately, my efforts finally paid off, as you came here. Crack. Roland struck first to gain the initiative before the burnt-faced man finished his sentence. This was a trick he had learned from his fighting experience in childhood. He could tell from the way the man acted and talked that he was a dangerous guy. Given that, it was not a wise choice to act after he finished talking. He straightly punched the man on his forehead, as fast as a flash of lightning. As he found his strength had increased sharply, he did not punch with all his power. However, he still clearly felt the man's bones cracking under his fist. His strike sent the burnt-faced man up into the air. Meanwhile, the warm flow inside his body began to surge, dancing with joy for such a good start. The man landed and rolled on the ground until hitting a wall. When he staggered to his feet, Roland came up to launch another attack without any hesitation. He believed his own judgment, as this was his dream world. Moreover, his opponent was obviously not a human being. When his face bones were broken, he seemed to feel no pain and did not beg for mercy at all. No human being suffering such a sharp pain could react this way. Roland felt that his mind was clearer than ever before. The violent warm flow filled his body, but did not make him woozy. He knew that at this moment, he should beat up the underdog, which was another trick he learned from his childhood fighting. This time, he hit the man with all his strength. He punched with no skills as if he was hitting a sandbag, keeping the burnt-faced man constantly moving to defend. Apparently, the man did not expect this at all and started flailing as Roland's blows were raining down upon him. Roland soon started to feel that hitting the man was like hitting tofu, as his muscles were torn loose after his arms, sternum and ribs broke. If he were a normal man, he would be dead at this moment. Roland scolded while giving the man a good thrashing, you asshole. Turn your head 180 degrees. You thought you were making a horror movie? He was very upset by the fact that as the creator of this world, he had been scared by the burnt-faced man when he had seen him in this alley. This is impossible. Why? I can't use it. The man's voice changed completely and soon Roland could hardly hear anything he was saying. Use what? Roland noticed that the cyclone on the man's forehead was twirling slower. He tried to reach out his hand to touch it and found that it became somewhat tangible. You mean the cyclone of magic power? No, don't touch it. Roland knew that he must do what his enemy did not want him to do. He held his head down and grabbed the cyclone. When the warm flow in his body began to boil, he tore it down. Suddenly, the burnt-faced man quieted down and collapsed to the ground, paralyzed and lifeless. The cyclone turned from dark red to a bright color when it fell into Roland's palm. Now it was white in the center and blue on the outside, more resembling a galaxy. It began to twirl again and quickly left his palm, turning into a beam of dazzling light. It shot up into the sky, leaving a trail like a silver wire and disappeared after several seconds. Meanwhile, the warm flow inside his body calmed down, giving him great satisfaction. He felt good from head to toe. He had completely lost his mind. He thought that this world might be more complicated than he imagined. Looking at the dead burnt-faced man on the ground, his mouth corner twisted and then he turned away heading for the exit of the alley. It was dark when he returned to the towering tube-shaped apartment building. A swarm of flying insects attracted by the light in it were buzzing noisily in the corridor. He fumbled to take out his key and inserted it into keyhole. Before he turned the key to open the door, he heard a burst of rapid footsteps behind it. Zero opened the door with a frown, but he still saw some worry in her eyes. "Where have you been? Where have you been?" they asked simultaneously. "The cram school added classes today. We'll get a day off tomorrow as some teachers will come to check. I had gone to look for you." "Look for me?" the little girl asked doubtingly. "Yeah, you didn't come back on time." Roland laughed while rubbing her head and then walked into the apartment. 3 dishes and some soup were already placed on the table, but all the bowls and chopsticks remained neat and clean. Obviously, Zero had been waiting for him to come back. That was why she had run to the door as soon as she had heard the sound at the door. Roland sat at the table and said, "Let's have dinner." "I'm starving." Zero stared at him, asking, "Were you worried that I was cheated by some stranger?" "I'm not a kid anymore. Next time, you can just wait for me at home." Roland could not help but roll his eyes at this, thinking, nowadays, junior high school students are so mature? I remember myself at this age, I was terribly naughty. When I still had some allowance, I would go to the game hall, and when I didn't, I would go into the mountains to catch chafers. I would never come home until it was dark. How come this little girl behaves so well? He somehow felt a little embarrassed for himself at this thought. "Oh, you've got a day off tomorrow?" What?" Zero still seemed a bit annoyed but looked relaxed. Roland said while eating, "Come to the library with me, I'll buy something for you on the way." "Buy what?" "Well, I bought you some clothes last time, so this time, let's buy some dresses, shoes, and pajamas. You have to get something new to replace what you are wearing now." He smiled. "I'll buy you a cell phone. We need to stay in touch in case something like this happens again." Chapter 662, The Defensive Line. Having stayed in the dream world for 2 days, Roland saw the gray slated roof of his castle again. He stretched out his hands, repeatedly bending and stretching his fingers. Except for the strange heat current, he had the same feeling as he had in the dream world. Luckily, he could take advantage of falling down to get rid of the dream world, otherwise he could not even tell the difference between reality and fantasy. Could the brain simulate such a realistic world? Roland could not help feeling confused about that. Especially the cluster of stars, which was particularly like the magic cyclone. Even though he had never seen the real look of magic power, if the force of nature was shaped based on the magic power, everything in the dream world should be fuzzy. Plus the eccentric burnt-faced man and the heat current that resonated with the cluster of stars. He suddenly was not sure about his previous presumptions. He felt like his small brain could not contain such a complex and huge dream world. But if the dream world did not exist in his subconsciousness, where was it? After thinking hard for a long while, Roland could not find a satisfactory answer. He shook his head and made up his mind to temporarily put these things aside. Since he could not figure it out, he thought that he should focus on the more important things. After he took Zero to the library, he learned a lot of useful design knowledge. Even if he just looked through a book, he could precisely reproduce its content. One of the books also covered the proportioning and property of some alloys, which could greatly save the test time for Anna and Lucia. Under such circumstances, it would be less difficult to create the third-generation machine tools used to forge higher precision parts. Of course, he had to personally instruct the first operational workers. People in different domains in Grey Castle were continuously gathering together in the western region. Some people who had settled down here passed the universal education test and got jobs. Upon thinking of this, Roland felt extremely heartened. This was a gradual process, but he had paved the way. When Grey Castle was unified next year, Neverwinter might have an opportunity to be on the threshold of the industrialization age. Once they entered the industrialization age, the domain would certainly undergo a tremendous change. In the afternoon, Karl van Bate, Minister of Construction, brought the news that Route 67 had been accomplished in less time than that of the Kingdom Main Street. Apart from a shorter distance, the workers had become more proficient in construction. As they promised before, the batch of workers who had been developed by the Ministry of Construction had been affiliated with the border area. Your Majesty, if you don't have any other road building plans, I'm planning to send them all to construct residential quarters. Karl said, though there will be extra salary expenditure, Neverwinter is in urgent need of residential quarters. Roland also knew this condition. There were altogether about 5,000 people in the construction team, half of whom were busy building new residential communities in order to accommodate the large population which had been persuaded by City Hall to come to Neverwinter from the other cities. Over just 1 year, the town had been enlarged at least over 3 times, which did not include the new farming land to the south of Redwater River. The road building can wait. He spread out the map of border area and pointed to North Slope Mountain, saying, I'm planning to build a railway directly connecting the mine and the pier so as to load the coal which comes from the west. There is already a road. Karl suddenly stopped and continued to say, are you saying a railway? Yes, a railway or railway track. Roland nodded and said, it's similar to the orbital transportation system of the mine, but it's made up of steel. I see. After a while of thinking, Karl said, but a railway doesn't need many workers either. It doesn't indeed need many workers to construct a narrowly hardened pavement. Roland smiled but did not point it out. Honestly speaking, he knew that Karl did not understand what he had said at all. In the mine, the coal depended on simple ropes, steam engines, and horses to carry the loads outside. But that was not what he thought, and it was for more than carrying coal. What he wanted was trains. Since its invention, the train had caused tremendous changes for land transport. And this short-distance railway was an attempt. It was not difficult to understand the principles of steam trains, but a railway system was gigantic and complex. Even if Roland did not know how many years it took to test and improve before the train and its supporting facilities were put into practice, he thought that it must be a long process. Luckily, I can find the knowledge in the dream world. He had been so obsessed with the gigantic trains which stood for industrialization. No matter how heavily they were loaded, the trains steadily traveled through forests and mountains as they puffed white gas. Black connecting rods drive many wheels to rotate, giving out a rhythmical clang and shortening the vast land to an acceptable distance. Afterwards, no matter what changes had taken place in the driving force, the nature of trains has never changed. Apart from the hardware facilities, a train also needed driving by a batch of railway workers who should be responsible for their own duties. So it was much more complex than simple steam engines and machine tools. According to Roland's plan, the railway connecting with the North Slope Mountain and the pier was not only a technological test but a training base for developing the first generation of railway workers. Send 200 people to pave the roadbed towards Misty Forest to the outside of the second city wall. Roland decided. Karl was anxious, Your Majesty, but the railway will be exposed to the attack of demonic beasts. Roland carelessly explained to him, they have no interest in steel. The railway won't be finished before the months of demons. Besides, we won't hide behind the short mud wall next year. Don't you feel that the border area is becoming more and more crowded? You mean? Roland pointed to the vast area to the northwest of the impassable mountain range and explained to him, we should expand the border area to the barbarian land where the resources are no less than Grey Castle. A thin mud wall is far from enough to defend against the demons. If the Battle of Divine will broke out and the demons build the third obelisk in Tekela, the outpost would approach the foot of the impassable mountain range. Hence, it was doomed to fail if they just set defensive lines in the breaches of the western region. If the Witch Cooperation Association could follow a mountain path to the barbarian land before, so would the demons to enter Grey Castle. Even though the demons gave up the mountain path, his troops would struggle to deal with a group of flying devil beasts who flew through mountains to harass them each day. Only if the impassable mountain range became the city wall would Grey Castle be safe. If the Longsong cannon were set up on each of the mountain tops, the area covered within the shooting range would be his new town. There were no rivers in this area connecting to the inner land. If resources such as coal needed quickly transporting to the barbarian land, they could only rely on a railway. The defense plan of the future is a big project, but I believe that you can do it. It sounded fascinating for any mason to bring the impassable mountain range into the territory of Grey Castle. If a mason could build such a city, he would certainly be remembered by history. Yes, Your Majesty, Carl said with an excited look. Chapter 663, The Spectacle. In addition, I intend to build a landmark in the city of Neverwinter, Roland continued to say. Landmark? Carl quickly composed himself after the excitement. Do you mean an eye-catching architecture such as a monument or a clock tower? You could also call it a spectacle. Carl was without a doubt a top figure in the Mason Guild of the King's City, judging by his quick response to such a new terminology. Roland nodded at first, then shook his head and said, "But I'm not going to build any useless landmark." After the battle with the church, the First Army suffered serious losses. Although Iron Axe reported that the army's morale was still high, the casualties caused huge grief to the families. In order to strengthen the confidence of the subjects, especially those who came from out of town, he came up with this amazing idea of the spectacle. Some spectacles in history were built entirely to satisfy the lust of the rulers without having any benefit to the builders. Even if this could highlight the power of the state, Roland would not build such a white elephant. I plan to build a residential building on the south bank of Redwater River, behind the industrial park. Carl did not reply as he must have realized that this was no ordinary building. Roland was very satisfied with Carl's calmness. It'll have about 15 floors, with a height of 3.5 meters per floor and an overall building height of more than 50 meters. In other words, it's close to the height of the 4 old city walls of the King's City. Was that the biggest project you've ever been involved in? Carl gasped. Your Majesty, this would be the Tower of Babel. I wouldn't consider it the Tower of Babel. It's just an ordinary high-rise building. Roland said laughingly, it just happens to be suitable as a landmark in this era. The 15-floor height meant that it would tower over the castle. It would be visible as soon as one entered the city of Neverwinter. It would not only symbolize the power of Neverwinter but also make up for the shortage of housing now. After all, high-rise residential buildings had a higher plot ratio than cottages. This explained why more and more skyscrapers were built in the future. Could residential buildings really be built so high? Carl seemed a bit skeptical. This is still far from the limitations of concrete. Roland thought for a moment and said, I'll personally guide you through it. Although a change of profession often meant a different field of knowledge, mechanics and structural principles were still interchangeable. Before coming up with this idea, he already considered many factors. The height might seem alarming, but in fact, it was not. For example, the Pyramid of Khufu, which was constructed in 2000 BC, possessed a height of over 140 meters and relied only on the piling up of stones. China also had wooden pagodas with a height of more than 130 meters. As long as the foundation was sturdy enough, the height would not be an issue. Provided stability would not be affected, future generations minimized the volume of the pillars and walls to reduce the cost of materials. Neverwinter already had a surplus of cement production, hence using it to build a concrete building was a good choice. It would also be advisable to use a multi-podium and towering building design for the structure. Although that would mean occupying more land, it would also greatly enhance the structural stability and reduce the difficulty of construction. More columns could be added if stability was an issue. Reinforced steel bars could also help with its quality. As long as the foundation was solid, it would be almost uncollapsible. The last issue was the casting of the concrete. Roland had already considered it and decided that Maggie and Hummingbird would rise into the sky, while Hummingbird would carry iron cans and pour concrete from the air. This would almost be as efficient as using the pump. Carl already had experience from building the witch building, which had the same concrete structure, and this time it was just on a slightly larger scale. The bamboo tendons and the steel wires would also be replaced by reinforced steel. He was highly confident about this project since he also had the witch union as technical support. Time's up. Everyone, please put your pens down. Scroll knocked on the table. Phew, Evelyn let out a deep breath. This meant that the second semester at Border Town, no, the city of Neverwinter, had finally ended. She ultimately managed to catch up with everyone else this year and participate in the final exam. She kept her charcoal pen and looked around. Anna was still nowhere to be found. According to Wendy, Anna had already reached a mysterious realm. Ordinary people who read her books would only feel dizzy and fall into a deep sleep as if they had depleted all their magic powers. Candle was also looking at her. When their eyes met, Candle even gave a thumbs up, to signify that she did well at the exam. Nightingale, who was sitting at the back, still looked dejected. Since the reading and writing tests were scrapped, her scores fell drastically, which made Evelyn quite puzzled. As far as she knew, Nightingale came from a noble background and received her education much earlier than other people. She should have an easier time when it came to learning. Perhaps Nightingale's ability was too important, hence she was kept busy all day handling tasks for His Majesty, and this, in turn, affected her studies. After all, Nightingale even fought alongside Lady Ashes as a combat witch. In Sleeping Island, she would be someone that Evelyn could only admire from a distance. The others seemed both happy and sad. For example, Agatha, Lucia, and Lily from the first tier always obtained high marks easily. Learning seemed to come naturally to them. Especially, Miss Agatha was already getting closer to Anna and Tilly. She was also a combat witch, thus making Evelyn extremely envious. For the remaining few, one could guess from the expression on their faces that Honey, Hummingbird, and Echo would come last if there were no mishaps. Of course, this did not include the new members of the Alliance, Paper and Summer. They were still not up to speed, and at the moment they were taught by Teacher Scroll alone. But Evelyn was most excited about Maggie. Looking at the guileless little girl, she could not help but want to laugh out aloud. There are no multiple-choice questions in the test. Since the previous final exam results, Evelyn remained heartbroken. She thought she was already very close to her goal and did not expect to lose by 1 point to Maggie. She even looked for Scroll to check if the results were wrong. In the end, she discovered that Maggie did very well for the multiple-choice questions, which proved she failed miserably. In the coming year, Evelyn spent most of her time on learning. She was able to display her ability quite quickly. She only needed to go to the winery 2 or 3 times per week, and it took her less than 10 minutes before she could cast all her magic power. Even when the bar was open later on, it still did not affect her performance. She never once had a match with the poker trio. When she had spare time while working at the bar, she would always flip open her exercise book to consolidate what she had learned that night. She did not let even her favorite perfume collection affect her learning. Evelyn would go shopping with Candle at Convenience Market only when the new flavor of perfume started selling on the shelves. She did all this in order to achieve the goal she set for herself. And this time, she was confident about winning. Chapter 664, The Mystery Moon Detective Squad. 3 days later, Evelyn got her grades for the final exam. She scored an amazing 113 points out of 150. This was a very high score, judging from her usual standards. Since Scroll accompanied His Majesty Roland to the Longsong area for inspection work, Sister Wendy was the one who told her about the results. She even patted Evelyn on her shoulder and said encouragingly, "Good work. Her Highness Tilly would be very happy when she gets to know about this. Keep up the great work. I'll continue to work hard." Evelyn nodded firmly and turned round to look for Candle. "How many points did you get?" 91 points, which is still a pass," Candle answered, looking at your happy expression. "You must have done very well on the test." Evelyn blurted. 113. "Really? This score is probably close to Lucia's." Candle said excitedly, would you like me to find out? I don't think so. They must have done better. Evelyn waved her hand. I only want to know Maggie's result. Perhaps my next goal could be replaced by Lily or Lucia, she thought. She was aware her ability was indeed very bad, but she was born like that which was unchangeable. Learning, however, was something that could improve with efforts. Even ordinary people could excel in learning, and hence she did not want to lose to anyone. She also wanted to be a learned and talented person like His Majesty Roland. After class, Evelyn found Maggie, but Maggie's reply was unbelievable. Cuckoo, I scored 117. How could this be possible? She stood there motionlessly for a long time, feeling incredulous even after Maggie left. How could this be? Scroll must have made a mistake in her results. For a moment, Evelyn thought she heard her own voice. She blinked, only to realize that the one who had spoken was Mystery Moon. She happened to hear the conversation and had a similar puzzled look on her face. What's so strange about that? Lily stared at Mystery Moon. Don't doubt the ability of others, just because you fared poorly. But I was sitting right in front of her. Mystery Moon tried to justify herself. When I collected the test, I saw that she drew honey jerky all over the blank paper. Are you sure? Lily frowned. I swear on my electromagnetic force. That's not in the least bit convincing at all. Lily shrugged and prepared to leave, but was pulled back by Mystery Moon. Wait a minute, what I said was all true. Maybe we should investigate. I'm not interested. Lily snarled. If you have any doubts, you can check with Scroll when she comes back. That would defeat the whole purpose of exploring, said Mystery Moon with an expression of mischief. Evelyn, let's help you to find out the truth. Don't count me in. What happened? Candle called out. Evelyn hesitated and then revealed her confused thoughts. What would you do if you wanted to investigate? Candle touched Evelyn's head and said, it takes a few days for Teacher Scroll to return, right? Now that both His Majesty and Nightingale are away, don't think that I'll allow you to sneak into the office. Lily glared at Mystery Moon. Don't think I'm unaware of what you plan to do. Steal the tests? I'm not that stupid. Mystery Moon shook her fingers. I just want to find out where Scroll marks the tests. You mean? Candle's eyes lit up. We just need to call Summer. She smirked. Evelyn instantly understood Mystery Moon's plan. Summer could replay the illusion where Scroll was scoring the test for Maggie, and the mystery would be solved. But Teacher Scroll usually does so at City Hall. Won't it be inappropriate for us to be there? What's wrong with that? In the city of Neverwinter, everyone can easily access City Hall, so there's no reason why we can't go. Mystery Moon shouted. It's not His Majesty's office, so I think some people should stop worrying unnecessarily. I have to remind you, said Lily, most people only have access to the lobby of City Hall. The office of the Ministry of Education is on the second floor. Do you think those officials will let us enter? Well, Mystery Moon was at a loss for words. In that case, let's forget about it, Evelyn said. She did not want to bother the others. I'll wait for a few more days. No, I have a way around it. Candle pondered as she touched her chin. Candle's method was very simple, which was to involve Nana. According to her plan, since Summer would already be involved, it would not matter if they called another person as well. And as it turned out, this method did work. Evelyn was amazed by Nana Pine's popularity. As soon as Nana entered City Hall the next day, she was greeted warmly and stopped by no one. This was probably due to the popular image of the little angel, or the fact that her father was a well-known noble in the border area who had been personally praised by His Majesty. Anyway, she entered the office of the Ministry of Education effortlessly. There was no one in the room. Few teachers would come here unless there was a meeting. We're in. Mystery Moon said excitedly, let's start backtracking. Are you sure, this is all right? Summer was a little hesitant. Only officials are allowed to be here. Officials are no different from us. Hummingbird is even the vice minister of the Ministry of Construction. Mystery Moon patted her chest and said, "Don't worry, as long as we don't say anything, Scroll would certainly not mind that we visited her office." "If I find out that you're lying, I promise I'll tell Scroll," Lily said coldly. "I thought you said you weren't coming?" I'm here to supervise you and prevent you from making a big mistake, got it?" Looking at the both of them arguing, Evelyn suddenly felt that her decision might be a mistake. Finally, Candle managed to persuade Summer. When the illusion appeared in the office, everyone held their breath. It was pretty clear that the exact time when Scroll marked the papers had to be the day after the exam and before she left for Longsong Stronghold. Summer quickly found the exact scene with a quick flashback. Everyone quickly squeezed behind Scroll. As long as the time had not lapsed for too long, Summer would be able to maintain the illusion for 30 minutes. Soon after, Evelyn saw Maggie's paper. "Look, I wasn't lying," Mystery Moon shouted. Lily could not help but frown. There was indeed a large amount of blank space on the paper. Other than the easier fill-in-the-blank questions plus the question-and-answer type of questions in front, almost no words were included in the calculation section. Some of the items even had drawings of roasted meat underneath them. Even Scroll was shaking her head unwittingly. It was very clear that this test could not have attained a score of 117. Could it be possible that Maggie was lying? Evelyn thought. Chapter 665, Chaos. Scroll quickly scanned through the entire examination paper, then wrote down at the front of the paper the total score of the 3 subjects, 17. The result was missing an entire 100 points. Well, so the problem lay with Maggie? Nana tilted her head. So, that's the result? Mystery Moon was greatly disappointed. So it wasn't Scroll who purposely gave a high score to Maggie in exchange for honey grilled meat, oh. Lily slapped the back of Mystery Moon's head. "Shut up. Should we continue to watch?" Summer asked timidly. "We should leave as soon as possible so that we won't get ourselves found out." "Let's wait for a second," said Candle. "Perhaps something went wrong when it was copied." "There's no need. I already know the result, so it's fine," Evelyn shook her head. If it were the original method of writing, it would indeed be possible to confuse the figures in a compact arrangement. However, in the universal education popularized by His Majesty Roland, the figures were replaced by simple, easy-to-remember single strokes, so the chances of committing mistakes were very slim. "I think it was Maggie who flew in from the window, making the jerky." "Stop." Mystery Moon covered her head. "Don't do it. I will stop talking." They saw Scroll check all the papers and begin to copy the scores onto a form. Maggie's column still reflected a score of 17 points. "The problem really didn't lie with Teacher Scroll," said Candle relievedly. "Can we go now?" Summer said anxiously. Evelyn was about to reply, but Scroll suddenly stood up and looked toward the doorway. 6 people immediately followed her gaze, then they noticed that the door was opened and a town hall apprentice appeared in the doorway. "What are they talking about?" asked Mystery Moon. There was no sound in the illusion, so they could only judge the conversation between the two by lip reading. It appeared to be Lord Scroll. "His Excellency Barev is sending for you?" Then Scroll nodded, and followed the apprentice out of the office. The moment the door closed, perhaps because of the air current, a cold wind suddenly picked up within the room. All the papers were blown and scattered messily all over the floor. "Ah, the window," Lily mumbled. Evelyn saw it too. The window that was previously closed was now open with a small gap. Scroll did not shut the window tight, and hence the open door generated an air current that forced the window to open. The autumn wind outdoors caused the window to swing back and forth, and open wider and wider. It was not long before a strong wind severely smashed it back to the window frame. Although the sound could not be heard, one could imagine the strong impact from the glass tremor. Something unexpected happened. An air current swept through the office again and caused the pen holder to fall on the desktop. The quill that was in the ink bottle suddenly flew up and landed exactly on that exam sheet. After crossing an arc in midair, the tip of the pen dropped on the table, leaving a stroke on Maggie's column and turning the original 17 into a 3-digit 117. Probably someone heard the loud noise coming out of the office, so the door was pushed open again. That apprentice reappeared to have a quick look around, and then came in astonishedly. She went to the window, shut all the windows tight, and then crouched to clean up the office for Scroll. She did not leave until she was satisfied that all the documents had been reorganized and neatly placed on the desk. Was this what had happened? Evelyn and Candle looked at each other. It was neither Scroll's error in copying the marks nor Maggie's intention to lie but an accident caused by the unexpected wind. Evelyn was then able to guess what happened next. Scroll received the order of His Majesty to make a trip to Longsong, so she passed the score sheet to Wendy. Wendy was not the person in charge of marking the exams, and even if she was puzzled by Maggie's performance, she would not question Scroll's judgment. Under the insistence of Mystery Moon, the truth has finally been revealed. Mystery Moon looked up and said, the culprit was Teacher Scroll. It was the wind. Lily gritted her teeth. But if Scroll had closed the window tightly, the wind would not have been able to blow the tests, nor the quill, right? How could you say this? No, Nana said thoughtfully, in that case, it would have been His Majesty Roland's fault. He built the city hall here, and not only did he expand it, he also built 2 more stories. Without this additional second story, Scroll would not be able to mark the papers here. You're right, so the culprit was His Majesty Roland? Enough, all of you. Excuse me, can I stop now? Summer seemed like she was about to burst into tears. Sorry, that's enough, said Evelyn patting her shoulder. Thank you, let's go. Hey, should we just leave like that? Maybe we can find the next quiz in the office? Mystery Moon stood in front of everyone to stop them. This was the real reason you wanted to come here. Lily rushed forward, I will never let you make trouble. I was just kidding. The investigation ended in a farce. After bidding farewell to Candle, Evelyn returned to the witch building alone. Although the truth had come to light, her mood was not calm at all. Somehow, the flying paper and the falling quill continued to emerge in her mind. Both actions were erratic and yet at the last minute formed ingenious and perfect results. The paper, the pen, the airflow caused by the door, and the time when the apprentice went in and out, all led to this result. Without any one of these conditions, the change of the score could not be achieved. However, these conditions were unconscious and chaotic. In that case, this could also be applied to mixing cocktails. A variety of ingredients are added to the alcohol, but you can't taste each and every ingredient. They are fused in the liquid and affect each other, creating a new taste that can be accepted by people after numerous attempts. Sometimes, a rare combination that happens by chance could also create those unique tastes. Evelyn could not help but think of the microscopic balls that His Majesty Roland mentioned. They continually make disorderly disturbances, each of which seemed irrelevant yet could portray marvelous traits. She closed her eyes and felt that something in her heart was ready to burst out. The world was full of chaos. But the results were hidden in the chaos. As if it were all meant to be. Evelyn forced her eyes open and reached for the cup on the table. Ripples appeared in the cold water, and then the color changed as if a drop of paint fell on them. The water gradually turned into a reddish-orange, and a fragrance she had never smelled before drifted into her nose. She hesitated for a moment, then started licking the liquid. An indescribable sweetness suddenly covered her tongue, slightly bitter, with a strong mellow flavor that was unmatched by any type of drink. It was not only like a mixture of fruit juice and milk but also like a mixture of tea and honey. Evelyn could not accurately describe the flavor, but she was sure of one thing. This was definitely not wine. Chapter 666, The Good and Bad News. A week later, Roland returned to the border area from Longsong Stronghold. As soon as he entered the castle, he received 2 pieces of good news. The first was brought by Barav. Your Majesty, the astrologers of the Old King's City arrived in Neverwinter 3 days ago. A total of 312 people came, including artisans, apprentices, and their families. I've arranged 9 astrologers to stay in the Foreign Affairs building, while the others have been temporarily arranged to stay at the reception area. This group of people is finally here, Roland thought for a moment, and then commanded. Let's hold a welcome party in the square this evening. I want the subjects of Neverwinter to know that there's now another school in the town. As with alchemy, astrology had a high reputation among the general population. Usually, only the King's City would possess both schools of thought. Now that the Astrology Association was approaching the western region, Neverwinter would become more accepted as the new King's City. However, Roland did not need the school of astrology divination. Instead, he really attached more importance to the astrologers' computing power. For this era, they were absolutely regarded as the forefront of the mathematicians. Both analyzing the calendars and estimating the orbit of the stars needed a lot of calculations. If they had relevant knowledge of middle and advanced mathematics, they could undoubtedly be better on the previous foundation. He intended to set up a school of mathematics to allow these people to devote most of their time to calculating, apart from the occasional observation of the star of extinction. In this era where there was no computer, many scholars working together to complete some complex operations was the most efficient choice. Whether it was for laying of railways in the future, constructing large ships, installing longsong cannon in the mountains, or writing shooting manuals, these all required their help. Yes, Your Majesty. Bhairav nodded, and then asked, I don't know if your trip to Longsong. I encountered a lot of problems. Roland did not need to conceal anything in front of Bhairav, the City Hall director. The secondary City Hall of Longsong Stronghold has already started to show signs of dereliction of duty and corruption. Scroll has found many fake accounts, and 2 corrupt men were even arrested from the batch of officials from the border area. At this sentence, Bhairav could not help but swallow his spittle. Are they my disciples? Roland was amused by the cautious look on Bhairav's face. He shook his head reluctantly. Even if they're your disciples, I wouldn't put the blame on you, so you can rest assured. Your Majesty is wise, Bhairav said hurriedly. So are they the original people from the town? Well, they were the second batch of graduates. After passing the assessment, they entered City Hall and then they were transferred to the Longsong area with the entire team. Roland sighed. As of today, it has only been less than a year. At the moment, City Hall had cultivated a group of semi-leaders. One group came from the Longsong area, which followed the exact model of border town. Together with the locals Honeysuckle Petrov, Elk Rene, and some minor nobility, they were a well-equipped group, just slightly smaller in numbers. The other half was a small batch that went to Fallen Dragon Ridge. In addition to assisting Countess Spear to maintain the political situation, their secondary task was to establish a framework for the secondary City Hall. There were also scholars from the northern region that came back with Edith Kant to learn about the management of City Hall. Together with these scholars, Roland could probably make up the other half in a short period of time. He had already allocated these people to the southernmost region. It was undoubtedly the local officials who could carry out Roland's will, who were the rarest of talents. Without them as the foundation, even if Roland conquered the entire kingdom of Grey Castle, he would not be able to centralize the kingdom's resources quickly. Local governments were an important part of the centralization of authority. He could use the witches to promote science and technology, but he could not create a bunch of grassroots officials from thin air. The sub-aristocrats would never obey his orders willingly. In the eyes of the feudalists, the only important thing was the small acreage that they occupied. Therefore, every person who had administrative experience was a rare treasure. After losing a few of them, Roland naturally felt depressed. Despite the inevitable corruption of the organization, he thought that they could persevere for more than a decade. He really did not expect to encounter such a problem in less than a year. The fact that the 2 corrupt people were born civilians also proved in some ways that once they had the power, they might be more likely to lose their way than the noble. Those who violate the law. All have been dealt with severely. Roland conceded. To set an example for everyone else. This should help to maintain everything for a few years, Nightingale and Scroll's ability temporarily preserved the integrity of the organization. But he also knew that the situation should be resolved in an alternative method, otherwise, the witches could easily be at risk again. And this time the enemy would come from the internal departments. Summon everyone of City Hall to gather in the castle hall tomorrow. I'll personally give them a briefing to talk about the importance of discipline and responsibility. Of course, there were also rewards and punishments. They should know how to choose when faced with the pressures and prospects of the battle of divine will. Yes, Your Majesty. Bear bowed. Looking at the old director's back as he left, Roland was satisfied and had a sip of his tea. He knew the reason for Barev's loyalty. Barev enjoyed the satisfaction that the power brought whilst chasing power, and also made good use of his power at the same time. Barev was undoubtedly a very suitable person for the new regime. Perhaps in the future of City Hall, only he could contend with Edith. The second good news came from Wendy. Evelyn's ability has been evolved? Roland was a little surprised when he heard the news. As far as he could remember, Evelyn's magic indicators were very balanced and did not seem prominent. He was quite surprised that she actually became the first witch on Sleeping Island to evolve. Yes. Agatha has confirmed this, but, Wendy bitterly smiled. The evolved ability is so weird that I don't know how to describe it. Take her to my office, he said excitedly. Evelyn went to the third floor of the castle, together with several glass bottles. Roland noticed that each bottle was filled with different colors of liquid. Her magic power looks like a gray ball, Nightingale whispered in his ear, but the shape isn't fixed. What's the total amount of magic power? The level of improvement is good. At the moment, she's between Soraya and Maggie. Roland nodded and looked at Evelyn. What's inside the bottles? The drinks that I've made with my ability in these days. She seemed a bit dejected. They taste different, and I absolutely lose control of the last result. The only thing in common is that they all can be drunk. Drinks? Roland's curiosity grew immense. He found a few cups and poured himself a glass from each bottle. When he first tasted the light blue drink, it was indescribably delicious, like a fruit juice mix, but also with a hint of refreshing coldness. Just drinkable? This is way too good a drink. Chapter 667, Chaos Drinks. Translator, Transen Editor, Transen. The following cups of drinks were real eye-openers for Roland. Some tasted like coffee, a bit bitter but with an intense exotic fragrance. Some tasted like soup, delicious and having the function to warm stomach. The unique one was that he could not find the corresponding taste in his memory. If he had to name it, Fire Dragon wine might be the most appropriate. The wine was not made of pitaya, but something like the imaginary dragon flame. The scorching impact of the first sip was like lava gushing into the mouth, and then a mouthful of a burned scent followed as if the tongue was roasted. The faint taste of succulent fruits finally came, mixed with the light flavor of the wine. The longer it was kept in the mouth, the longer the aftertaste would remain. It absolutely would be the best drink of the winter. It was likely that Nightingale saw Roland's intoxicated looks. She could not help but show herself, moistened her lips and asked, "Your Majesty, it really tastes so good?" "You'll know after you try it." Roland handed her a cup of drink. Immediately, Nightingale contentedly exclaimed, with her eyes bent into a slit. "I've tasted it," Wendy said with the same look, "and it's really hard to resist such a delicious drink." After they drank all of the Fire Dragon wine, Roland revealed a little reluctance as he let out a burp. "Is there more drink like this?" Evelyn shook her head and said, "I can't copy the last drink. The new ability is totally random." "Can't copy?" Roland was somewhat amazed. He finally understood what distressed Evelyn after Wendy explicitly stated the details of the test. The ability could turn the fresh water, wine or other liquids into drinks. However, which drink would be the final product was uncontrollable. In other words, the final product each time was totally different. The consumption of magical power to transform these drinks was much more than that of to transform alcohol. The magic power could only be cast once per day. The quantity of transformed drink was limited, which was equal to the capacity of a barrel. Roland had seen that kind of round barrel in the tavern, which could store about 1 cubic meter of wine in each barrel. Until now, Evelyn had just cast the new ability 5 times, getting 5 drinks with different tastes. Roland felt regret at the prospect, not knowing whether he would get the chance to drink fire dragon wine again. It was possibly the reason that Evelyn felt so depressed. High Awakening could be considered as a rebirth for witches, for they even had chances to upgrade from being a non-combat witch to a combat witch. Although Roland stressed that each witch was of incredible potential, Evelyn, who came from Sleeping Island, still could not change her mind. Roland knew that Evelyn had no confidence in her brewing technique. She felt far more depressed despite the fact that her new ability upgraded a lot but did not change in essence. Most of the drinks were transformed from wine, and she could not even control what she could make at all. He had no better ways to change her long-held belief, but it was a matter of time. Roland believed that their state of mind would change as the assistant witches in the city of Neverwinter showed their extraordinary talents. He held no confidence in saying her ability was useless. The pursuit of perfume ushered in the modern navigation times. The Silk Road thrived as the porcelains and silk trade boomed, which all served as the evidence to people's demands and desire for luxuries. These drinks, however, would be the true luxuries. The delicious taste and unique experience would inevitably gain popularity among common people no matter which era they were in, and it even brought a refreshing feeling to this mundane world. Moreover, it was almost cost-free. For example, it was no surprise that the weight of the fire dragon wine could be converted into the same weight of gold royals if it was sold to the fjords and other kingdoms. Because there were always some rich merchants and nobles that could pay for it. As for the war caused by the desire for luxuries, they should feel gratified that Roland did not scramble for these drinks. Waging war for luxuries to Neverwinter was nothing short of committing suicide. Admittedly, Evelyn would bring him countless wealth. And these drinks would not only be used for trade. He had learned from the past experience that the matters widely popular with people could serve as a bridge for culture and ideology. Besides, in these hard war times, it could boost morale for those soldiers who were fighting on the outer edge of the impassable mountain range if they could have such drinks delivered from the city of Neverwinter. He would never reject these kinds of drinks which could enhance cohesion and strengthen the subject's confidence to resist the battle of divine will. In addition to the alcohol, in the future, it'll be the transformation of high-grade wines. I'll create a special drink storage building for you. Roland made a decision and said, you can use your new capabilities to their full potential. I believe everyone who has a drink will be obsessed with it. All right. Your Majesty. Although Evelyn agreed, she was still nonetheless skeptical. She did not realize her own worth. Roland did not say aloud what he was thinking. He firmly believed Evelyn would see the changes brought by her power of chaos sooner or later. As long as she kept doing as he required. As for the names of these drinks, Chaos Drinks is okay, Roland said with a smile. After the welcome dinner came to an end, Astrologer of Dispersion Star went into the study of His Majesty Roland. He had successively worked for 3 King Wimbledons, and Roland Wimbledon was the 4th king he worked for. But he was also the king whose thoughts were illusory. Regardless of those rumors about his ridiculousness and flighty behavior from the king's city, the young ruler was somewhat different from the former kings and it was hard to understand what he was thinking. He was neither arrogant nor pretended to be imperturbable, as if his thought was beyond common people's understanding, making him hard to catch up to. That letter of reply was the best proof. Dispersion Star had never seen any king who was so indifferent to the news about the Star of Extinction. Part of the content of the letter was greetings, part was to invite Astrology Association to move to the western region, declaring that he had the better astronomical telescope to meet the demand for star observation. The end of the letter unhurriedly mentioned that the city of Neverwinter also found new clues about Bloody Moon, and that he needed to discuss it with astrologers. No surprise, no fear, he stayed calm and read the letter as if he just said yes, I know nonchalantly. In fact, even when Roland first visited the observatory and learned of the existence of the Star of Extinction, he did not act very surprised. Although it was the blessing that the subject had such a composed king, He still felt downcast because of the finding, also his lifelong pursuit, not arousing much attention. The study was still brightly lit, and His Majesty Roland was writing something. There were piles of documents on the desk. Dispersion Star had not seen such a scene for a long time. "My revered Majesty, good evening," he bowed and said with gratification. "The Astrology Association shows its respect to you." "Ah, you're here." Roland put his pen aside and beckoned him, saying, "Sit down, I've something to talk to you about." Chapter 668, Dispersion Star Astrologer. "Is it regarding the prophecy of the bloody moon?" Dispersion Star sat down. "Well, that's a part of it. Since you've touched on that point, let's start with the prophecy then." The young king rose to his feet and poured a cup of tea for the astrologer, who was totally struck by such an act of condescension. Apparently, Roland was much more easygoing than Timothy. With respect to the prophecy of the bloody moon, it can be traced back to over 1,000 years ago, when there was neither the Kingdom of Greycastle nor the Wimbledon family. "But Your Majesty, the records show that our history only dates back to over 450 years ago." The missing part was indeed documented but was later deliberately concealed by someone. Roland switched to a more comfortable sitting position and said, "It's a long story, which I'll need some time to fully explain to you." What the astrologer heard afterward was inscrutably astonishing. The story brought him back to the uninhabited barbarian land and the land of dawn 1,000 years ago, when demons and human beings had had a prolonged war of life and death. It talked about the symbolic meaning of the bloody moon, the witch empire, the origins of the four kingdoms, as well as that of the church. If it was not out of the mouth of the king, Dispersion Star would definitely condemn the speech and describe it as horrendous and absurd. Nonetheless, from Roland's expression, Dispersion Star could tell the king was absolutely serious. After Roland finished the speech, Dispersion Star felt suffocated. He had firmly believed that the doomsday was simply a god's punishment. The shaking seabed, the cracking earth, the underground fire and thunderbolts from the sky, as terrifying as they were, would not completely destroy human civilizations. As long as men got prepared in advance, a great part of cities could still survive these catastrophes. According to His Majesty, however, the bloody moon was a signal of the commencement of the war from demons. It seemed that the war between human beings and demons had lasted for 1,000 years. Men had been defeated twice, and one more, they would be completely eliminated from the earth. "Your Majesty," Dispersion Star almost lost his voice. "Where did you learn these?" Roland stuck out 2 fingers. "The witch empire and the church. They both have something to do with the establishment of the 4 kingdoms, including the Kingdom of Greycastle. I've actually encountered demons to the west of the western region. They were, veritably, of a foreign race, who have developed their own civilization and built their own armies." "And, what's the smile of deities?" "Nobody knows. Perhaps we'll only find out the answer after the battle of divine will." Dispersion Star fell silent. He was not sure whether he should believe this appalling narrative, but then he soon realized the story connected to the rise and fall of the Kingdom of Greycastle and the thriving of the Wimbledon family. As the king of the realm, Roland had no reason to lie to him. There was no point for him to do that. Suppose everything Roland had said was true, it would then make sense why His Majesty trusted witches so much. Suppose witches' power did not come from demons, naturally, they would no longer be men's enemies. In this light, the rumors about the innocence of witches circulated in the old king's city were simply a tip of the iceberg of the truth. Without a doubt, it was pretty wise and cautious of His Majesty to selectively disclose the information and hold back the part that would potentially spark panic among the multitude. The only thing that Dispersion Star failed to understand was how the bloody moon in the sky bore a relationship to the gates of hell. "Your Majesty, what can I do for you?" Dimly, Dispersion Star was aware that it was probably not out of any astrological reasons that the king had asked the Astrology Association to move to the western region several times. Roland apparently knew much more about the Star of Extinction than any astrologers. If Dispersion Star was not informed of this secret today, he would never possibly know what had happened 1,000 years ago. "This is what I want to discuss with you next, which may be even more important than the secret I told you earlier," Roland answered with a smile and handed a book on the desk to him. Take a look at this first. Dispersion Star took the book and noticed the title on the cover was a combination of phrases he had never seen before. Analytic geometry? The word was quite a mouthful. Surprisingly, it was printed in a blue color that could only be produced with very fine and expensive blue pigments. Take your time. It's fine if you don't understand. You'll need to learn a lot of things in the future. Although the lighting in Roland's room was relatively decent even without a candle, it was still not comparable to daylight. As such, Dispersion Star felt reluctant to read the book right away, as late-night reading could more or less cause eye damage. As an astrologer, he should well protect his eyes. Nevertheless, Dispersion Star did not want to directly decline the king's request and thereby infuriate him. So, he decided to just quickly skim it through and read more carefully tomorrow when there was adequate lighting. His eyes, however, were glued to the contents after he read the prologue on the first page. To describe the orbits of objects with arithmetic formulas? To calculate the entire orbit with only a few key parameters? Next came several groups of intersecting straight lines, each of which constituted a coordinate system consisting of 4 planes. In each coordinate, there was a simple shape. Some were just diagonal straight lines, some a section of a curve, some ovals, and others a combination of multiple curves. They looked nothing strange, but Dispersion Star's attention was soon caught by the arithmetic formula next to the circle shape. That should be an arithmetic formula, thought Dispersion Star. The formula contained a plus mark and an equal mark, starting and ending with the same symbol. Dispersion Star did not have the faintest idea what the formula represented, but somehow he perceived the beauty of it. Every symbol possessed a unique charm and was in perfect harmony with the others. Although each shape was distinct from each other and by no means display the same type of orbit, for example, a straight line and an oval, there was no noticeable difference between their arithmetic formulas. An idea suddenly flashed across his mind uncontrollably. Is it possible that every shape in this world can be described with a corresponding arithmetic formula? The astrologer turned to the second page hurriedly in excitement. By the time Dispersion Star closed the book, his neck was sore. Evidently, it had taken him more than an hour to read the whole book. Meanwhile, Roland appeared to be quite absorbed in his occupation. He was busy drafting the document on the desk and had not interrupted his reading. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty." Done?" Roland looked up and smiled at the astrologer. "I bet there's a lot you don't understand." "Yes. I don't recall any court mentors have taught you those symbols and formulas. Out of 10 court mentors, 9 were from the Astrology Association." However, what His Majesty had written had totally blown his mind. "They're very interesting, but I just can't have a good grasp on these complicated formula conversions." "That's because you haven't learned equations. You've got to learn this in order to comprehend analytic geometry." Magically, the king produced a stack of books from the desk and presented them to the astrologer, the titles of which were either in blue or green. All of the titles sounded weird and mouthful. Dispersion Star's hands started to tremble. "Can I take them back home?" "Certainly." Roland nodded. "Actually, I want not only you but also all the astrologers and the students in the association to learn them." After a pause, Roland continued, "The second thing I want to let you know is that you don't need to worry too much about the bloody moon. Once you fully understand everything in the books, the Astrology Association can play an irreplaceable role in the war against demons. These books mean to simply enlighten you. There'll be something more profound and difficult coming next. By that time, you'll not only be able to calculate the orbit of a moving object, but also that of every tree and every stone on the earth, every star in the sky, everything that you see on this planet. How does it sound like? Are you willing to accept the challenge?" "Yes, I'd like to, Your Majesty." Astrologer of Dispersion Star gave an affirmative answer immediately, now completely elevated from the dejection he had sunk in when Roland had ignored his discovery of the star of extinction. He now foresaw thousands of stars moved along the paths he calculated. The young king, in the meantime, smiled. The smile was so strange that it reminded Dispersion Star of a hunter who watched an animal slowly falling into his trap. Awesome. But please don't be discouraged. It's going to be hard, and it's perfectly normal that you come across some obstacles. I believe you'll eventually get the hang of them. Chapter 669, Diplomatic Turmoil. Number 76 had gradually taken Denise's place since becoming Yurko's maid. It did not mean that Yurko forgot about his old lover. The truth was that he had to spend some time taking care of his poor guide. In fact, Yurko had been totally shocked when number 76 had been sent back by her superintendent Silver Mask the other day. The punishment had been indeed as severe as Black Money had earlier claimed. There had been whip marks and bruises all over her body, and she had looked nothing like the girl he had met half a day ago. Yurko was happy that he had made the request to retain number 76 as his maid in a timely fashion. Otherwise, the girl would probably be wrecked by the battery. That was why Silver Mask had said she could no longer be a guide, for customers definitely would not want a disabled girl to serve them. Fortunately, number 76 was not as fragile as most girls. She had a pretty strong body, especially her abdomen and back, on which several faint muscle lines could be detected. She had quickly recovered from the injuries after medication and was now able to run errands for the household, which, of course, also included some personal services. For example, the service like she provided today. "Sir, do you want me to massage your shoulders?" After number 76 cleaned the house, she drew close to Yurko smilingly. Although according to general rules, maids were not allowed to approach their masters without permission, number 76 was apparently still employing the old method she had learned from Black Money to please her guest. Yurko did not feel offended in the least. On the contrary, he liked the flirty way she communicated with him. If number 76 was simply a maid who strictly followed rules and obeyed his orders, it would be a little too boring to his taste. "Come and sit here." Yurko put down the anecdote book in his hand and lay down on the recliner. Number 76 took off his shoes and sat on her knees so that Yurko could rest his head on her thighs comfortably. She then started to slowly massage Yurko's shoulders with her 5 slender fingers. Apparently, number 76 had received professional training, for she used much greater strength and applied more techniques than other ordinary massage girls, who usually flirted with Yurko in the guise of massage. The labor delivered by number 76 really worked and made Yurko feel less stressed. Yurko could clearly see number 76's countenance when he lay on her thighs. After Black Money had sent her over, she no longer needed to wear that copper mask to conceal her identity. Frankly speaking, number 76 was never a beauty. Her overall appearance was just a little above average and certainly could not compare to witches. Nevertheless, Yurko liked her red, plump lips in particular. When he looked up at her, he was always aroused by the faint smile lingering on her lips. In comparison, her toned body was more appealing to Yurko. It was actually Yurko's first time to see a woman's body full of such incredible strength. Unlike corpulent noble ladies or scrawny peasant girls, number 76 had well-proportioned limbs, beautiful skins, a prodigal projection of bosom and a flat tummy. When her body tensed up, Yurko could sense her bulging muscles underneath. As a man who always sought thrills, he was more drawn to a perfect body like this than simply a delicate face. When Yurko was about to take the next step, the door was flung open. It was Hill Fox. Yurko let out a sigh of disappointment. It appeared his leisure time for today was over. He erected himself and asked, "I hope you aren't asking me to save some witches again." Hill did not respond but simply eyed number 76. The girl soon took the hint and withdrew respectfully. Yurko shrugged. "You're being overcautious. She's just a servant. You'd better remain vigilant these days when the current situation in the Kingdom of Dawn is yet to be optimistic. Denise is more reputable than number 76, and she's from a more distinguished family. Why don't you keep your eyes peeled for her?" "Because Denise Payton is a public figure, whose background was no hidden secret. You can get the information about her one way or another, but there's no way whatsoever for you to check the background of a guide trained by Black Money. Hill seated himself opposite Yurko and placed a letter on the coffee table between them. But I feel I've already known what kind of person she is and where she's from now. Yurko smiled triumphantly. Do you care to hear it? Oh, really? Hill's brows went up a fraction of an inch. Surprise me. Yurko grinned. He was satisfied to know that the guard appointed by his old friend appeared not be omniscient after all. It takes a lot of time to train a perfect guide. It'll at least take 10 years to perfect her pillow skills and tone up her body. Those skills she obtained from years of training have already become a part of her, and it has become so natural to her to please and serve her customers. How old is she now? Around 21 or 22. No more than 25. Correct. That means she was only a 5 or 6-year-old kid when she started her training. Unless she's a monster who never ages or dies, she can't be a person outside black money. Yurko spread out his hands. There's no conflict of interest between us and black money anyway. They conduct much dirtier businesses than trafficking slaves and protecting witches, not to mention that we haven't actually managed to protect a witch yet. Yurko went on with self-mockery, I don't think witches need protection from us. Yurko was in a very complacent mood when he saw Hillfox remain silent. His self-satisfaction, nonetheless, soon disappeared a minute after he opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. It was an official diplomatic letter signed by King Roland. The content of the letter made Yurko quiver in terror. The King of Grey Castle intended to stop the King of Dawn persecuting witches? Yurko was overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of the event. This was the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn, not the western region of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Was his old friend under the impression that Apen Moya would listen to his counsel? The series of threats following seemed to be even more ridiculous. Roland advised the King of Dawn not to go against the stream and warned him that the ruling of the church, which was starting to decay, provided the best example. He also stated that the Kingdom of Grey Castle would not stand by and would take next step if necessary. Roland hoped that Apen could use his best judgment in all situations. Although the letter was phrased very politely, Yurko believed everybody in the palace would be sensible enough to sniff out the threatening voice between the lines. Roland was obviously indicating that the Kingdom of Dawn would be his next enemy if their king refused to follow his suggestion. How could he say that to the King of Dawn directly? Yurko returned the letter to Hill sullenly. All his contentment faded into restlessness. Hill was right. To His Majesty, witches were more important than the alliance. He wondered, however, what else these threats would bring about other than growing repugnance among great nobles in the Kingdom of Dawn. The letter could be nothing but another conversation piece. What should I do? It appeared that he had no choice but to rely on Hill's counsel. Hill took a quick glance at the letter and replied, Do as His Majesty says. This is your duty as an ambassador. As to the consequence, I bet the worst scenario would be that Apen Moya expels you from the court in rage. You won't run into any danger. Then we'll be done with these nobles. Yurko said gloomily, people in the city of Glow will regard us as crazy and laugh about it in their cups, and Roland will become their new topic of discussion. What will His Majesty benefit from such a bluff? A bluff? Hill neither agreed nor disagreed. Do you really think it's a bluff? Yurko's heart suddenly stopped beating with a jerk. He looked at the guard in dismay. No, that can't be. Hill said slowly, Timothy Wimbledon also thought so before the old King's city fell. Based on what I know of His Majesty, he never wastes his time. Chapter 670, The Sad Ambassador. Yurko requested to present himself on the court meeting the following day. As the two kingdoms had just formed an alliance, his request was soon approved, and 2 magnificently armored knights escorted him to the palace hall. Over the past 2 to 3 months, Yurko had made numerous vain attempts to see King of Dawn. He wished now, however, that King Apen could have ignored him like he had usually done. Unfortunately, the reality was always cruel. By the time he entered the hall, the court meeting was close to its end. The young king was leaning against his throne, talking animatedly with the ministers. He did not sit up until Yurko bent his knees. Please rise. I've heard you've brought a letter from Roland Wimbledon? Yes, Your Majesty, Yorko answered mechanically. He congratulates on your coronation and has expressed his earnest desire that the two kingdoms will establish a long-term relationship of cooperation and friendship. Apan Moya smiled. That sounds something new. Did he send any presents? Well, of course. The ambassador revolved his reply rapidly in his mind. The fleet carrying those presents are currently on the way. The letter was actually delivered by post horses. I remember when King Wimbledon III was crowned, my father sent a delegation of 200 people to celebrate his coronation. There were 11 wagons full of presents, including goldware, fine wines, silk as well as pretty maids. I'm very curious about what Roland would gift me as a return. The ministers in the hall burst into a fit of laughter. Yorko swallowed hard, completely having no idea how to shoot back an answer. He doubted the validity of the story and wondered why Roland had not said anything about presents in the letter. As an ambassador, he had a good reason to be ignorant of the matter. However, for Roland, he should have known the gift-giving etiquette. Did he say anything else? Apan asked. For a second, Yorko wanted to excuse himself. Yet when he weighed the consequence of such an act, he forced himself to stay put. The outcome of infuriating King of Dawn would be no more than being shut out by nobles in the king's city. If he disappointed Roland, however, he would probably be relieved from the position as an ambassador. Yorko ground his teeth. His Majesty, also hopes that you stop persecuting witches and treat them as free peoples. Otherwise, the Kingdom of Grey Castle would have to employ force to settle the matter, just as what they did to the church. The hall was deadly silent after he finished. The ambassador felt sweat started to bead on his forehead. After quite a while, Apan Moya broke off. Did Roland Wimbledon really say that? Give me the letter. A knight approached Yorko at once and snatched the parchment from him. Yorko could sense the coldness in King of Dawn's tone even without looking at him. He was almost about to wail at the thought of the lengthy condemnation and warns in the letter. As he expected, Apan threw the letter to the floor straight away after reading it. The young king obviously had a hard time controlling his temper. He rose to his heels and growled in a red rage. So this is the attitude of the Kingdom of Grey Castle to its ally? Witches are innocent, so we have to set them free? Rubbish. Look at what those damn witches did to House Moya. They invaded the palace, killed the guards and took my father as their hostage to force me to yield to the church. If they didn't poison my father, he should have been right here, alive and well. But he's dead, and it's his death has made you the king. Yorko left the remaining word unsaid. Your Majesty, please calm down. As far as I know, witches trained by the church are different from innocent ones, just as there are good and bad ones among ordinary people. Shut up. Apan hollered. You don't have the faintest idea how vile these people in possession of demons' power are. Even God's stones fail to stop them. Tell me then. How could it be possible that such a community, which is literally bounded to nothing, submits to our ruling? The Kingdom of Dawn will be more peaceful without witches. I have to fulfill my obligations of protecting my people. Looking at Apan's purple face, Yorko realized reasoning would no longer work. The shadow of his father's death was still haunting him. Although Apan was of about the same age as Roland, he was almost as petulant as the old Roland back in the king's city, and perhaps even worse. In merely a year after Roland had left the king's city, he had become the real sovereign of the state. Apan, on the contrary, was still acting the boy. I'll write a letter to the King of Grey Castle and advise him to be vigilant about the fallen. It's just ridiculous to threaten the Kingdom of Dawn because of those devil's minions. Apan paced back and forth indignantly. It's true that the Kingdom of Grey Castle is powerful. But don't forget who bestowed him such power. Without the support of local nobles, Roland couldn't garrison his troops in here. If he invades our royal domain out of such absurdity, he'll suppress his feudatories in the same way he treats us. By that time, neither my people nor nobles in the Kingdom of Grey Castle will support him like they always did when he battled against the church. Well, it appears that Roland has already weeded out the nobles. Yorko thought to himself. He did not really know how His Majesty had defeated the church, but he dimly remembered that Roland had not relied on any nobles when conquering the king's city. At that time, out of the entire kingdom of Grey Castle, few people had believed that Prince Roland Wimbledon would have eventually won the Game of Thrones. All the great nobles had later been rooted out during the trial, which was why he could get this job as an ambassador. In the end, Yorko was ordered to leave the palace by Apen Moya just as Hill had anticipated. Fortunately, none of the ministers in the court chimed in. They were simply too dumbfounded to utter a word. This was better than what Yorko had expected. But Yorko was pretty sure that after they read the letter on the floor, they would dismiss it with a laugh. As soon as Yorko returned from the palace, Otto Luashi paid him a visit. King Roland really views this matter in this way? Do I sound like I'm lying? Yorko collapsed in the recliner. Well, are you mocking me now? No. I just think Apen's new policy is rather thoughtless. He does want civilians in the Kingdom of Dawn to have a peaceful life, but the hunting measures he takes actually terrifies people. Then you should talk him out of it. He doesn't listen, Otto smiled bitterly. He acts like a different person every time we talk about witches. You can't blame him though. If you witness what happened in the palace, Otto bit his lip. No, nothing. The death of the late king greatly shocked Apen. Technically, he shouldn't have ascended the throne until he comes of age 5 or 6 years later. I've heard King Wimbledon III was also killed by the witch from the church. If only Apen can be as composed as King Roland. Yorko gazed at Otto in surprise. He felt like Otto did not sound like the eldest son of one of the 3 major families in the Kingdom of Dawn but a noble from the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Had Roland become so invincible that he could now make nobles in the neighbor country stand on his side? Anyway, I'll try to talk to Apen again. He doesn't even listen to Earl Quinn now. Otto was about to take his leave after the tea when number 76 suddenly darted into the room. Sir, the witch you purchased has come back. Chapter 671, A Turbulent Situation. Yorko lamented in silence. Hell, didn't they agree not to meet each other ever again? It's just a courtesy to say please feel free to contact the ambassador if you come across any difficulties. He exchanged a look with Otto. After hesitating for quite a while, Yorko said, send her in. If it was not because the real buyer was here, Yorko would rather make up some excuses such as the ambassador was currently not available. Please come again later and shut her out. Number 76 soon led the girl to the room. As he had expected, it was the 10th item in the black money auction, Amy. The witch grasped Yorko's arm anxiously as soon as she came in. Sir, please help us. Annie and the others are in danger. Danger? Yorko feared that it was not a good sign. Slow down, slow down. Take a seat first. Yorko patted her on the shoulder. Tell me what exactly happened. We've been found. Amy uttered a series of broken words breathlessly. A large number of patrol teams surrounded the orphanage and blocked off the roads in the vicinity. I saw more than 1 platoons of knights. They're searching for witches one block after another. The other witches are still stuck in there. Please, help them. Are there other witches apart from you and Annie? Yes, Hero and Broken Sword. Hero lost her legs, so Annie has to carry her on the back. Yorko gasped. 1 was already enough for him to worry about, and there were 4. How did you escape? Our food is running low, so I went out to buy some groceries. By the time I came back, they had been everywhere. Her voice trailed off into a barely suppressed sob. Yorko found himself in a very difficult position. Although titled with Ambassador of Grey Castle, he did not have any actual executive power. Therefore, it was impossible for him to stop the patrol team. Further, the operation was commanded by the King of Dawn, whom he had just vexed a great deal during the court meeting. If he now stood out to protect the witches, he would probably face a more severe consequence than being expelled from the palace. Don't worry. They'll be okay. Number 76 consoled Amy while gently stroking her back. Sir Yurko must know how to bring them back safe and sound. Not at all. Yurko snapped in silence. If Amy could have sought Roland for protection as he had suggested earlier, nothing of these would have happened. What about that Mr. Hill? Otto questioned. I don't know. He never reports to me, and oftentimes I can't find him anywhere. Yurko frowned. If you want to see him, I'm afraid it has to be after dinner. I see. I'll look for Earl Quinn first. He's the King's Prime Minister and is in charge of the patrol team. Perhaps he can help them escape. Hang on. Will he listen to you? I've no idea, but it's worth giving it a shot. Otto gave a look full of mixed feelings. Do you still remember the witch friend I talked about earlier? Her name is Andrea Quinn. She's the daughter of Earl Quinn. Time slowly slipped away. Yurko could do nothing other than looking out of the window while waiting. Meanwhile, number 76 did an amazing job in comforting Amy. The agitated girl finally calmed down and fell asleep in the recliner. Yurko could tell that the long journey had cost the witch a great amount of energy. Having said that, it was still pretty gullible of her to sleep at a place like this. By evenfall, Hill Fox was back to the ambassador mansion. Where did you go? No sooner had Yurko finished his sentence than he found 3 people followed Hill to the room. Actually, it was 2.5 people. One of them was even half a head taller than Hill, her face stained with blood and her bright eyes observant. It was the same Annie who had taken away Amy from Black Money the other day. She was carrying a purple-haired girl on her back. Out of convenience, the girl was closely attached to Annie with 2 straps clutching her waist and her shoulders. From the dangling pants, Yurko knew she must be Legless Hero. The person who entered last was about the same height as number 76. She had shoulder-length silver hair, gaunt and frail, with her hands at the waist, as though she had sustained severe injuries. Awakened by the patterings of footsteps, Amy was stunned for a second before throwing herself to Annie. You all escaped. Thank God. Did those knights hurt you? I'm fine, but broken sword. She consumed a lot of magic power. I've been so worried about you. Amy could not hold back her emotions anymore and broke out into tears. Annie's here. Nothing to fret about now. Hero offered her solace. Yurko gaped. How did you meet them? It's a long story. They must leave here as soon as possible. Hill grabbed the ambassador's hand and pulled him aside to the bedroom. Listen, you guys must leave the city of Glow before the city gate closes. Our wagons are ready, 5 in total. The first 2 will carry wheat and fruit, and you'll get on the other 3. Hold on for a second, Yurko interrupted. You just said. You guys? You and the witches, not including me. Hill stressed each word with due strength. In order not to obstruct His Majesty's plan, we have to keep in touch with the Kingdom of Dawn. But I'm the ambassador. That's exactly why you need to leave. In a critical moment like this, Hill appeared to be even more self-collected than usual. Look, I didn't save these 3 witches. What? Yurko was shocked. Not you? My birds are always hanging around the tourney square. If I can't find the witches, it would be a better idea to see how my rivals locate them. I received the news right after the knights set out. Unfortunately, by the time I got there, the block had been under a siege. Only rats from the Black Street know how to get in there. So you bribed the rats? I've been keeping in contact with local rats since I arrived at the Kingdom of Dawn. Although it has cost a big chunk of money, they do sometimes help me in the event of a crisis. Hill said in a low tone, but the 3 witches had already fled by the time I found their traces with the help of the rats. Isn't that perfect? I'll ask Denise to get them out of here. Let's pretend nothing has happened. Hill shook his head. It isn't that simple. The King of Dawn already knew where the hiding place of these witches exactly is. He has manpower sufficient enough to turn the whole block inside out. How did they escape? There's only one possible explanation: they let the witches go. Perhaps Appin wants to expose more hidden witches in this way, or rather, he wants to find out the person who supports them. Yorko swallowed hard. If that's indeed the case, it would be too risky to linger in the city of Glow. The best option is to leave as soon as you can. Hill continued, if you can bring 4 witches to His Majesty, the payoff of that would be significantly greater than fulfilling your duties as an ambassador. What about you? Yorko asked hesitantly. If you get caught, they can arrest a person with a legit name, but not a nameless man who secretly hides in the darkness. In their eyes, I never exist. Hill chuckled. Nobody will ever notice one guard in the delegation is missing, and Lord Otto will also cover for me. Do you remember what I said? I'm just an ordinary acrobat. Next time you and His Majesty visit the Kingdom of Dawn, you'll probably see a brand new acrobatics troupe in this prosperous city of Glow. Chapter 672, Hero. At length, Yorko followed Hill's advice. In the golden glow of sunset, their coach departed the city of Glow. All the coachmen worked for Hill, who were said to be former employees of the acrobatics troupe. After transporting slaves with the caravan for several times, they had known the retreating route by heart. The fleet did not slow down until the sun completely disappeared behind the mountains. They still, nevertheless, continued with the procession for about 2 hours after night fell with the help of an oil lamp before pitching their tent in the wilderness. The coaches arrayed in a circle around a bonfire. A young man who called himself Clown quickly fetched some water and started to make porridge. A tall guy named Rockhill went to feed the horses. The magician was responsible for patrolling and putting out sentries and calm brothers setting up booby traps. These people were more like members of an army than of an acrobatics troupe. Yorko found he did not need to do anything other than waiting for the delicious porridge to be served to him. Apart from the porridge, he also got a plate of bacon and an apple. He now understood why Hill had decided to include wheat and fruit in their cargo. The food in the 2 wagons, the so-called goods for sale, would suffice to feed all of them throughout the journey even if they had to commute for 1 to 2 months. Yorko wondered if Hill had prepared to flee the Kingdom of Dawn long before, for it had not taken him a considerably long time to load all the food. He had heard from his guards that Hill had kept in touch with Black Street rats. Jesus! Is that guy really just an acrobat? Yorko resolved to ask his old friend about it after he returned to the Kingdom of Grey Castle. All the coachmen strode off with their porridge and stayed at the outer ring respectfully, leaving Yorko, number 76 and the 4 witches in the circle. I apologize for what I said and did the other day, Annie said cordially. You didn't hand us to the King of Dawn, but I still can't fully trust you. Why? Amy looked confused. He doesn't look like a bad man. Yorko blushed at this compliment, as he had never considered himself a good man. Fortunately, the flush was so faint compared with the light of the bonfire that nobody perceived it. Ahem, I reckon that Miss Annie still feels suspicious of the simplicity of the witch organization in the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Simplicity? For example, some powerful nobles love to keep some witches and use them as their playthings. That's just one of my concerns, Annie interrupted. Whether it's in Wolfheart or Grey Castle, all such organizations will be essentially the same if they intend to lure and abuse witches with lies. If the one in Grey Castle does operate in the way you claimed, I'll certainly make a formal apology to you. It doesn't matter to me. Yorko shrugged. My task is to bring you to King Roland. What happens next doesn't have anything to do with me. Even if you want to apologize to me, you may not have a chance to see me in the future. There was an awkward silence. For a second, no audible sounds could be heard except the crack of the bonfire. Yorko was usually very good at socializing and making conversations. He did not feel like talking, however, with these witches. They had not only disturbed his peaceful life as an ambassador but had also put the emissary delegation in a risky position. There was nothing wrong about being cautious, but the fact that his every single act was under scrutiny really irked him. In the end, number 76 broke the silence. Are you all from the Kingdom of Wolfheart? She asked. Amy told me that you've known each other for quite a while. Annie nodded. You're correct, although we weren't born in the same city. Wolfheart is now taken by the church. You've certainly suffered a lot on the way to the Kingdom of Dawn. Number 76 stooped over and touched Hiro's dangling pants. She asked in a low voice, did she lose her feet during her escape from the church? Hiro bit her lip bitterly, head lowered. They were chopped off by the people she aimed to protect. Annie's answer surprised everyone. Hiro stood out when Wolfheart City encountered the biggest crisis in the history of time, but all she got was hatred from its people. Hurt by the people she protected? Annie nodded. I can explain to you if you want to know. But it isn't a happy story. Number 76 gazed at Hiro for a moment and replied in a serious tone, I want to know. Yorko pricked up his ears, though he pretended to be fully absorbed in the bacon he was eating. When the church army attacked Wolfheart City a year ago, they threw a large number of bodies infected by the demonic plague into the city, in an attempt to bleed off the strength of the king's city, just like what they did at Broken Tooth Castle. Annie added 2 more twigs to the bonfire, which soon splintered up into glitters of sparks. But Hiro stopped the demonic plague from spreading with her ability. She could transfer the disease to other living creatures. That was why the plague got under control. What kind of living creatures? Rats, cats, dogs, cows, sheep, etc., also including human beings, Annie replied slowly. Citizens dug a huge hole at the slum. People who got infected would gather there and ask Hiro to transfer their disease to animals. They would then burn the animals in the hole. Gradually, people started to view Hiro as the lifesaver of Wolfheart City and began to call her Hiro. Amy and I also received her treatment. But things turned for the worse. A large animal was enough to bear the disease from 5 or 6 patients, whereas cats and dogs could only bear 1 or 2. As the church continued to spread the demonic plague, even if people of Wolfheart could catch all living creatures, it would not be enough for all patients. They just couldn't save everyone. As the war prolonged, people started to lay their eyes on men. The word made Yorko feel chilled to the bone. Number 76 drew close to Hiro and gently pressed the witch to her bosom. That wasn't your fault. In the flickering light, Annie's face was masked with ice. Of course it wasn't her fault. Those people never gave her a chance to choose from the beginning. First, they burned prisoners, criminals, and volunteers. Then they started to burn the elders, wounded soldiers, and captives from the Judgment Army. But Hiro didn't do what these crazy men asked her to. She just couldn't kill innocent people, especially those soldiers who yearned for life and miners who had yielded. So, the attitude of the public toward her changed. People started to believe that she colluded with the church and were protecting their enemies. The saver had thus become a traitor. Hiro was later imprisoned. If it were not because of her ability, she had probably been sent to the gallows long before. Afterward, the church launched another attack. It only took them 1 day to seize the city wall of the king's city. On the day the city fell, the jailer, who had once been treated by Hiro, chopped her legs off with an axe and then set the cell ablaze. He argued that the fall of the kingdom of Wolfheart was the result of the collusion between Hiro and the church. He said as a traitor, Hiro couldn't go anywhere but should be burned and destroyed together with the city. At these words, Annie fell into a short silence. But the jailer never anticipated that Hiro, who lost the ability to move, would be saved by captives from the Judgment Army in the cell. Chapter 673, A Sacrifice. Would church believers save a witch? Yorko did not realize that he had already forgotten about the bacon and had been all ears as Annie continued with the story. They helped Hiro out of the cell. With their help, Hiro successfully escaped the search from the church. After the war, the survived Judgment warriors even provided her with food and clothes for a period of time, until their army returned to Hermes and they had to bid farewell. Before they departed, all the Judgment warriors who had been imprisoned in that cell expressed their gratitude to her. Yorko knitted his brows. But regarding the title hero, could it be? She's a hero. The whip was in Annie's voice again. No matter how the citizens who received her treatment look at her, she did save thousands of people in Wolfheart City, including me and Amy. She deserved such a title. The ambassador let out a sigh. He had not known that witches suffered far more than he had imagined. If he were unfairly treated in that way, He would view everyone as his enemy and kill all of them to avenge himself, and certainly would not trust anybody. Yorko's indignation for being under constant suspicion gradually dissipated. Her legs can probably be healed. Really? Are you serious? What should we do? All the eyes rested on Yorko in a second, including Hiro's. She could be no more than 18 or 19 years old by her look. Although misfortunes had weighed down upon her, she had not been devastated by all the snares and toils she had been through during the war. Her eyes were still full of hope instead of numbness and confusion. Ahem, I'm not sure. Yorko rubbed his nose. Hill once said there are over 300 witches in Grey Castle. Their power of the devil. No, I mean their abilities should vary, right? Perhaps somebody can regenerate amputated limbs or even grow a new one. 300? Number 76 exclaimed in surprise. How did the king of Grey Castle get so many witches? It's a long story. My old friend is a born king. He saw through the church's scheme a long time ago. Not only does he allow witches in his domain to live a normal life, but he also insists on the innocence of witches and advertises this concept throughout Grey Castle. Gradually, more witches turned to him for protection and work for him. Yorko took this opportunity to lavish praise on Roland. So you don't need to worry about your future life at all. His Majesty claims that everyone in Neverwinter will be suited to a job, including witches. What kind of jobs? Amy's eyes were glistening. How should I know? I haven't been to Neverwinter, Yorko thought to himself. Naturally, it depends on your ability. For example, if you can manipulate flames, you can be a blacksmith. If you can conjure whirlwinds, you can work at a mill to activate windmills, something like that. Yorko rambled. Anyway, His Majesty is planning to build a new king's city in the western region, and he certainly needs people. Even if your ability can't help with anything, you can still work as an ordinary person. Sounds pretty good indeed. Annie eyed Amy, who apparently wanted to voice out. But lies always sound better than reality. At present, I got it. I got it. You haven't fully trusted me yet, right? Yorko spread out his hands. Then trust your own eyes when you get there. By the way, how did you know Hiro? Number 76 put in. When Wolfheart City fell, I happened to live at Amy's place. I noticed the curious behavior of the Judgment Army soldiers, so I followed them and discovered Hiro, Annie answered while fiddling with the bonfire. We met Broken Sword several months later. She was caught by church believers who garrisoned there and was to be sent to Holy City. I ambushed the unit who escorted her and thus saved Broken Sword. You alone? If I'm fully prepared, it actually isn't any harder to raid a group of soldiers than a pack of animals, Annie said placidly. After that ambush, however, the church intensified their searching operation by several times, and we had nowhere to hide. So we joined refugees and left Wolfheart. We went all the way to the south until finally settling down in the orphanage in the city of Glow. What a dramatic escape. Number 76 commented with a sigh. But it's far from the end, Yorko thought, although the hunt by the Kingdom of Dawn isn't as nerve-wracking as the one by the church, the number of the armies running after them is more than enough to kill them all. Yorko hoped that all Hill's concerns were just groundless fears, otherwise App and Moya would never set them free. As long as they were still within the territory of the Kingdom of Dawn, they were not considered to be safe. He shook his head to put these annoying thoughts behind. Let's finish the dinner and sleep soon. We have a long journey ahead of us tomorrow. Surprisingly, they did not encounter any obstructions in the next few days. They took the route planned out by the magician and managed to avoid entering any cities. Instead, they exclusively picked paths in the rural area. 5 days later, they reached Wind Ridge of the Kingdom of Dawn. Another day of traveling towards south would bring them to the north of the Grey Castle. Yorko felt a little relieved. He did not like the feeling of being alert all the time, for even the slightest sound at night would wake him up. In comparison, number 76 was more self-collected. She took good care of both witches and Yorko. Within a few days, number 76 had totally blended in with these witches. She was, in particular, close to Amy, the most naive one, who had almost viewed number 76 as her fourth sister. Yorko leaned against the soft cushion while looking at the endless winding mountains and yellow fields outside the window. He started to hum involuntarily. He had failed to fulfill his duties as an ambassador, but instead, he brought his old friend 4 witches. If Hill was right, how many rewards would His Majesty bestow him? While he was still absorbed in his dream, the magician responsible for security suddenly came to him from the rear of the fleet. "Sir, we may have trouble. It looks like we've been tailed." "What?" Yorko's heart leaped into his throat. He quickly poked his head out of the window but did not find anything unusual. "There are knights 7 or 8 miles away from us. You can't see them from here." The magician spurred his horse into a small trot in order to keep up with the coach. "They don't march very fast, but we're even slower. If things go on like this, they'll sooner or later catch up and spot us." "Are you sure there are enemies?" "No. I took a glimpse from a distance, but I can't take the chance. There are around 20 to 30 people, all fully armored. They don't have any extra relaying horses. It's probable that they tracked us through our hoof prints." "Then what should we do?" Yorko instantly panicked out. "We must get off the carriage and walk. There's a wood close by where horses can't go through, which can impede the procession of the knights," the magician replied in a low voice. "But this will only bring down their speed to the same level of ours. Once we're caught up, all of us will be doomed. If we want to successfully get rid of them, one person has to lead the fleet to move on and divert them to the main road." He paused for a second and went on, "In other words, somebody has to make a sacrifice." Chapter 674, Number 76. The carriages had stopped and all lined up along the side of the road while the Calm brothers were busy tying them together. This way, it was possible for one person to drive all the vehicles. After an intense argument, Annie had finally convinced the witches, taking them to follow Clown, plunging into the forest. Now, it was the remaining people and Yorko's turn. Rockhill carried a bag of food and walked past him, saying, "My lord, we must leave now. If the enemies notice us, then all of our previous efforts will be wasted." "Wait a minute. I want to talk with her." He thought it would take him a while to make a decision, but he actually needed less than 15 minutes. Number 76 voluntarily stepped forward. As did Rockhill and Annie, but as the leader of the group, Yorko eventually selected number 76 to stay behind to cover their retreat. "I went through 5 years of combat training at the Black Money. I'm a fast runner, too, so don't worry about me." Number 76's words were simple as an ordinary farewell. "Isn't there a village nearby? When I drive the carriages to the village and sneak into the crowd, they won't be able to find me at all. After this crisis, I'll join you guys again, right at the border city of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Please remember to wait for me there." Meanwhile, the magician was quietly whispering to him that the village was more than 10 miles away. Given the distance, it would be impossible for anyone to make it there before the knights arrived, and after taking the time to tie the carriages together, their chances became even slimmer. "If our pursuers haven't been ordered by the King of Dawn to capture witches, there isn't a need for concern." However, if what the magician had predicted happened to be true, Yorko could easily imagine how the knights would vent their anger once they found out number 76 had deceived them. Yorko had a sinking suspicion that if the carriages happened to be stopped by the knightage from the King's City of Dawn, he would be the sole survivor. Appen Moya would likely ask Roland for a ransom, and he might ridicule and make him a laughingstock among the nobility. However, he would not hastily send him to the guillotine. Unfortunately, anyone else that got caught would end up being executed without remorse. He thought, perhaps, he should be the one to stay behind to attract the attention of their pursuers. He wanted to step forward numerous times, but he kept chickening out every time he tried to open his mouth. An ambassador represents his king. "I can't let them catch me and mock me because that would be the same as humiliating the King of Grey Castle." Yorko comforted himself. Unfortunately, he now was unable to look number 76 in the eye. God damn it. She's just a bought slave. Yorko walked over to number 76 and just as he was about to say something, she spoke first. My lord, this is my decision. This has nothing to do with the black money, even though Silver Mask always instructs us to be ready to sacrifice ourselves for it. However, I don't like it at all. I thought I would be living underground for my entire life to adulate those customers until I grew old and became the new Silver Mask. Or, sent off to become a handyman also to never to see the sun again. Fortunately, you brought me out of that place. You made it so I could feel the vastness of the outside world and I've no regrets now. Please hurry into the forest. You're running out of time. But. Number 76 smiled and said, Thank you, my lord. If you hadn't said anything, I would have been beaten to death in that underground limestone cave. My life belongs to you, and I may survive this crisis. If I do, let's meet in the kingdom of Grey Castle. The Calm brothers were behind Yorko urging him, My lord, we have to go now. Yorko took a deep breath, turned around, and left. Yes, she's just a slave. This is the best option. Yorko believed this, but he still felt an indescribable uneasiness in his heart. Before he entered the forest, he turned one last time to look back. The carriages had begun to move slowly, driven by number 76. She didn't linger and she didn't wave to bid farewell, she acted as if this were a common departure. Just like the way she volunteered. Soon, the shade from the forest blocked his view. Number 76 did not drive the carriages all the way to the village. After traveling for about 300 feet, she reined in her horse and stopped the carriages. She wouldn't be able to see the entrance of the forest anymore if she walked further. She jumped off her horse and sat on the back of the last carriage, quietly waiting for the arrival of their pursuers. She had been waiting for quite some time, however, it felt as if only a moment had passed. Waiting was a habit she had developed over her very long life, so she had become accustomed to it. As the sun began to set in the west, she could finally see the knights' figures appearing at the end of the road. They didn't wear an emblem or ribbon as the knightage of the king's city did, but based on their exquisite armor and high horses they were from some big city. Number 76 tactfully counted the number of knights. There were 35 of them, half of which were squires whose equipment and actions seemed to be more refined than the knights from a small town or village. The leader of the knights frowned when he saw the carriages waiting on the side of the road. He cracked his whip and the knights swarmed forward, surrounding them. Sir Lugon, there's no one else in the carriages. Interesting. It looks like our ambassador of Grey Castle sent out scouts. Lugon smiled scornfully. Caro, Jester, you two go back and check for footprints on both sides of the road. Since they've abandoned their carriages and fled, they must have left some trace. Lugon's words conveyed his intent. Sir, what about the woman? Cut off her hands and feet, then interrogate her. Unfortunately, since she dared to stay behind, you probably won't get any information from her. Number 76 stood up as she said, There's no need for an interrogation. They fled into that forest not too far behind you, but, what? A knight drew his sword with one hand and stretched out his other to try and grab her arm. Apparently, the knights were not going to spare her life, even if she told them what they wanted to know. But, you guys won't get the chance to see the witches again. With her impressive speed, number 76 lifted her hand and clutched the wrist of the closest knight. She pulled his arm, sending him up into the air, flying involuntarily toward her. She took this chance to slip his head under her armpit, getting him into a headlock. She used her shoulder and squeezed. His armor made an unpleasant rattling noise and then with a snap, his helmet was dislodged, leaving a fist-sized gap in his armor near his throat. The knight cramped violently, mouth gaping like a fish that had just been pulled from a river. Let go of Charlie. God damn it. Kill her. The other knights all pulled out their swords and thrust them towards number 76. Number 76 tossed the dead knight toward them, forcing them to pull back their swords. Taking her chance, she picked up the dead knight's sword and struck out at the nearest enemy. Chapter 675, Last Hope. The blade cut through the armor neatly, blood splashing out from the cuts like red strings. The knight did not make any sound as she had expected but instead grabbed her hand firmly as if to gain more time for his companions. Unfortunately, he misjudged the difference in their power. Number 76 easily escaped from his grasp, kicking him away while drawing out her blade. Her kick felt like a blunder blow and his armor was entirely deformed. The knight spat out a mouthful of blood and smashed on the ground, no longer making any sound. It seemed like her fists and kicks were more convenient. Number 76 glanced at her already dull blade, threw it away and jumped towards the rest of them with her bare fists. The hunters instantly became the prey. She jumped high and started jumping on the clumsy knight's shoulders. Every time she landed on a knight's head, she would clamp his helmet with her feet and then spin with the help of her body inertia, which resulted in a crackling noise as his cervical spine broke. Compared with number 76's swift movements, the knight's counterattack and dodging were not different from that of a pile of wood. There was no problem even if she was unable to land on their heads, as she could hit their joints to make them lose their balance and then finish them off with a fatal kick. She could also easily trap her opponents with her physical gestures and lead them to attack her simultaneously only to end up killing themselves in the end. This is impossible. A damn monster. After a few rounds, the knights realized that their enemy was not normal. Not only did she possess extraordinary strength but was also an expert in the art of fencing and close combat skills. She was obviously an experienced fighter and her killing skills did not match the look of a 20-year-old girl at all. Everyone move aside. With a loud cry, Sir Lugon led his horse in the crowd towards number 76. The rest quickly closed in around her, trying to trap her among them. Number 76 sneered, did not retreat but instead went straight ahead and grabbed with her hands the horse's front legs, immobilizing it while it neighed non-stop. No one could believe in their eyes when they saw what happened next. She lifted both the knight and his mount in the air and threw them to the others around her. The ones that got hit sustained wounds ranging from fractures and bleeding to immediate death. The knight himself sustained the worst impact naturally. As he fell from the horse's back, his body was distorted into an unnatural shape. The surviving pursuers instantly scattered. They jumped on their horses rushing to escape from this monster. But number 76 did not plan to give them this chance. As soon as the enemy gave up resisting, a massacre started. The knight had already fallen when number 76 finally finished cleaning up the battlefield. The bodies of the knights were thrown into a nearby field and were covered briefly with some wheat straws. Discovering them was only a matter of time but by that time the witches would have already retreated to the kingdom of Grey Castle. She crawled in the most extravagant coach, removed the cushion that Yorko usually slept on and carefully took out a colorful sparkling magic stone ring under the mattress. Even under the weak moonlight, one could see a cyclone swirling inside the transparent crystal. After carefully examining the ring, number 76 put it in her robe, fixed the cushion and lay on her back. Next, she only needed to reach the next village and hire a wheeler to take her to the kingdom of Grey Castle. They would probably not stay long at the border, maybe not even one day, but as long as her destination was the western region of the kingdom of Grey Castle, she would be able to meet those witches one day. Looking at the bright moon outside the window, she sighed. 400 years had passed. The union that used to reign the world had disappeared like dust in the wind. The only thing that remained unchanged was the stars in the sky. Only when she looked up to the sky, would she feel like she was still alive, not just being alive underground or in the present after the disappearance of the Union, but actually living at the holy city of Tequila 400 years ago. That extremely prosperous witch empire. The road to escape afterward, that could not be counted as living anymore. The only thing that kept her going was a last remaining hope. So, how does it feel to have a female body once again? Someone asked. Do you feel like you're being yourself again? She took deep breaths and moved her wrists and heels. The distance is shorter. Of course, because this body is kind of small. A body too sturdy wouldn't be convenient to serve those humans. The voice laughed. Furthermore, female gods' punishment soldiers are already so rare. Don't be so picky. Appearance and age are also very important, someone else said, assuming the tastes of humans haven't changed a lot. None would want those body shells that look like men. Just looking at them makes one feel disgusted. You can ask Elena if you don't believe me. She would prefer a male body instead of a defective product like that. Correct. Among everyone, yours is the best looking. You know what I mean, Pasha. She shook her head, staring at the huge sarcoma in front of her with the moving tentacles. Like this, I have to practice my limb control from the start. From sewing to holding a blade, each move would require a long time to master. It's okay. A tentacle dropped down and slowly poked her forehead. We have got all the time in the world. Why do we need to deal with common people? Alethea, who was soaking in hot magma, blew a chain of bubbles in dissatisfaction. Can't we bring the witches here to test their talent? Are you confused because of the long sleep? Pasha refuted her. It's not like 400 years ago anymore. 1 or 2 would be alright, but do you plan to catch 100 witches and bring them all in the mountains? I don't want to be regarded as a monster from the later generation. Even so, can't we let a witch execute this task? Don't forget that all of these bodies are actually enemies of the witches. First of all, she must completely trust us and possess the ability to protect herself. Where can we find someone like that? Nowadays the common people control the world, so it's inevitable to deal with them, just like in the Land of Dawn at the first battle of Divine Will. Pasha paused, stuck a tentacle out and pointed at her. What do you think? She played with her sword, threw it in the air, and just by slightly moving her body she let it slide into the scabbard. I don't have any preference, as long as I can see Tequila's glory once again. Chapter 676, The Pursuit. Sometimes, when she didn't want to train anymore, she would also enter the deepest area of the maze to see the magic core that the survivors of Tequila had so many high hopes for. This is the completely repaired instrument of divine retribution? Are you sure it's useful? The biggest core looked like a simple spindle apparatus, nearing the size of a senior witch's experiment tower. Dozens of white brackets like visceral ribs were releasing magic power into it. Its uniqueness was obvious as it was floating mid-air of the maze without any hangings or support. Due to the cold light that the core emitted, the floor was no longer plain red. Of course, I've been studying it for 385 years. A piece of sarcoma appeared from above and landed next to her using its tentacles. The more I study it, the more I feel like it's a creation of God. Comparing with it, the things that had been researched by the Quest Society like the sigil of magic stones were literally trash. Well, they were not even close to the essence of the magic power. If we had found this ruin 400 years ago, there would be probably no second battle of Divine Will. Celine would always become extremely excited whenever talking about the magic core, so she could only pat her rough exterior. Have you verified the other cores? Of course, Pasha even used the phantom instrument to display a miracle at the extremely far kingdom of common people. Oh, you were probably still asleep at that time, so you didn't see it. That far? She asked surprisingly. Correct, much farther than any ability can reach, even the infinite sigil can't be compared with it, Celine replied while shaking her tentacles. This is the power of the magic core. It allows the witches to possess power beyond their limits. That common person who kneeled down in shock because of the miracle is the best proof. The magic core should have been our aim, not the damn God's punishment army. Long live Lady Natalia. But without the God's punishment army scheme, we wouldn't be able to survive until now. She pointed out. Well, long live Lady Alice too, Celine murmured reluctantly. But I heard Pasha saying that in order to activate the instrument of divine retribution, the Chosen One is also required, is that right? Correct, the Chosen One. This magic core is too immense and complicated. Without the Chosen One, it would be just a dead object unable to become a new deity. Celine used her tentacles to grab her hand. This is why all of our hopes rest with you. You must find her. If she does exist. Hearing that, the voice of the sarcoma became heavier. Yeah, if she does exist. Why can't I become the Chosen One? I heard that Starfall City has been defeated. They've been defeated by the common people. After receiving the news, the magma underground started boiling, and all the sleeping ones and the waking ones started shaking their tentacles excitingly, which was the only way they could express their emotions. But not everyone was excited by the news. How can this be possible? For instance, Alethia's dancing expressed shock and anger. How can they be defeated by common people? Are the news credible? Someone asked. I'll ask the Chamber of Commerce of Dawn to investigate this. Pasha moved her tentacles to quiet them down. Behave yourselves, don't shake the whole burrow. Surprisingly, even though they all looked alike, huge sarcomas with several tentacles on their epidermis, she could still recognize each of them easily. It was probably due to the fact that they had been living here for so many years that she could distinctly remember everything from their breath frequency to their tentacle movements. Pasha bent her huge figure and immersed in the lava. For tequila. All the sarcomas that could still move dropped down and many voices sounded. For tequila. The turbulent lava soon calmed down. Once the news has been confirmed, I suggest we immediately retrieve the divine relic, Elena said. Starfall City no longer fits to possess it. But in that case, a fight with the gods' punishment army will be unavoidable, and I don't believe that they'll be unprepared. Even though they lost to the common people, it doesn't mean that Hermes would also be vulnerable, Alethea said in doubt. Who knows how the common people won? Maybe they just killed a few hundreds of gods' punishment soldiers and then believed to have claimed an important victory. This is also possible. I also think so. Many expressed their approval. The other common people will help us understand, Pasha said, and right now, the most important thing is to find the chosen one. Banach Lothar has already set up the stage. Now, it was time for the actors to perform. If she can succeed in finding the chosen one in this trip, the demons will definitely perish and the witches will eventually reach new heights. She walked to the exit of the ruin and stopped. There was a huge palace, half of it being covered by dirt. At the center of the palace, there was a patio that reached the 10-meter-high surface. Bright white light shed down the patio, forming a gentle beam of light which lit up a piece of land at her feet. Opposite from the patio, there were 2 tombstones. In contrast with their shabby and dirty surroundings, there was no trace of dust on the tombstones. Obviously, for hundreds of years, someone who had been sweeping this area clean had also planted a small plain white flower for the person in the tomb. She bent over, with one knee in front of the tomb. This was where the greatest witches were buried. No matter what kind of disagreements they had before, or how intense their disputes were, it was ultimately for the survival of the witches. Thus, even after death, they were put together, never to be separated. 2 of the Union's 3 chiefs. Alice, the unstoppable queen of Starfall City. Natalia, the dazzling queen of Sunchasur. May the deities be with you. After praying, she stood up and nodded to the top. I'm ready, and please send me away. A tentacle appeared from the dark, rolled up around her waist and rose towards the patio. The sky looked bigger and bigger until there was nothing but the sky anymore. She blinked her eyes trying to get used to the bright light, then slowly opened her eyes and saw the long-awaited world unfolding before her eyes. I can only come this far. Pasha's tentacle waved from the hole's exit. This body can't be exposed to the sun. I know. She bent over and hugged the tentacle for goodbye. Wait for my good news. Oh right, you can't use your previous name anymore. The Chamber of Commerce of the Common People will arrange a new identity for you, as well as a new more appropriate name, number 76. Sounds nice. She smiled. I'll be going then. Take care. You too. So, in order to pursue that faint hope, a new journey had begun. Chapter 677, The Promised Reunion. Even though walking in the forest slowed them down, it was a sound trip. 3 days later, Yorko encountered a team of soldiers of the Grey Castle miles away from the boundary. They were searching along the road. They wore unique brown leather uniforms with long metal rifles on their backs, which clearly showed their identities to him. He understood what had happened when he met Duke Kant after he followed the team and returned to Evernight. Having received the letter from Hill, His Majesty Roland had directly sent 2 confidential letters away. One was to order the platoon of the First Army that stationed in Deep Valley Town to divide into 4 troops and enter the Kingdom of Dawn from the 4 junctions of the boundaries so as to reinforce the retreating diplomatic personnel. The other one was to inform Duke of the Northern Region to be ready for a war. That meant that the Duke began to prepare military materials, such as grain, cotton, and horse carriages. When the main army arrived in the Northern Region, they could declare a war to the Kingdom of Dawn. Fortunately, the emissary delegation had had a sound trip. The Duke exhaled a long breath of relief when he was saying this sentence. Yorko felt flattered. But what touched him the most was how his old friend had responded to this incident. Though he clearly knew that the 4 witches in the delegation were more important, but his name was ranked at the top of the list in the letter. He felt that he had nothing to complain about his suffering and scary experiences at the thought of such a good treatment. Yorko wrote a long letter about what had happened during the process of the retreat. He handed it over to the Duke, who would pass the letter to His Majesty. He hoped that His Majesty could put an end to the military tensions in the Northern Region. Now, he understood what Hill had said was true. His Majesty took it much more seriously. Additionally, he was quite surprised by the responding speed of the First Army. Apart from the time for carrier pigeons to deliver letters back and forth, the army, which originally bore responsibilities to defend against the remaining force of the church and demonic beasts, could carry out the operation on the very day they received the order. As far as he knew, nobles used to spend half a month summoning knights, mercenaries, and free peoples, let alone dividing them into groups to carry out missions. Once the troops spread out with less supervision, those mercenaries paid a fortime would escape over one night. This might be the reason why his old friend could conquer the king's city in one day. Now, Yorko dimly understood that the military force of His Majesty was much better than that of the other nobles, not only in terms of weapons but actually beat them in every other aspect. As a messenger, he was not alone. The whole kingdom backed him up and fought with him as his sharp sword. He felt exhilarated at this thought, like there was a flame burning in his chest. Now, number 76 was the only one he was worried about. According to his promise to her, the first person who arrived at the destination would hang a 4-colored flag at a visible spot. Yet Duke Kant ordered his men to search each corner of Evernight but did not find such a flag. Now that they lived in the house arranged by the Duke, Yorko directly set up a flagpole in front of the door with a 4-colored flag fluttering in the wind. Once number 76 entered the inner city, she would immediately see the flag and find them. Actually, he was not the only one that worried about number 76. Through windows, Yorko often saw Annie and Amy standing under the flagpole and waiting for number 76's safe return. As they knew each other better, Annie gradually changed her attitude towards him. At least, she would not stare at him, full of vigilance. Hill's men had talked to him several times and they had hoped that he could go to the Western region as soon as possible. The magician had directly told him that the chance that number 76 successfully distracted the knights while at the same time staying alive was narrow. If those knights had not targeted at them, she would have arrived at the border village one day later and arrived in Evernight earlier than they had. Now, nothing happened at their meeting spot, so number 76 was very likely dead already. Yorko knew that the magician was right, but he wanted to wait for another few days, just for the words she had said when parting. When the situation turns better, I'll meet you again, right in the border city of the Grey Castle. Make sure that you wait for me there. After they parted, Yorko finally knew why he had that strange feeling. Although number 76 was a slave in name, he never treated her like a slave, neither in the Black Money nor in the Kingdom of Dawn. Yorko had decided to give her freedom if she came back alive. But the decision came too late. 3 more days passed. While he was thinking about leaving the northern region the next day, things seemed to turn for the better. A carriage stopped beside the flagpole. The coachman seemed to be very anxious and wanted to ask the guards about something, but he was afraid to come forward to ask. Yorko witnessed everything through the window, but before he came out, Annie and Amy had gone up to the carriage. Number 76 came back. Each member of the delegation had heard the news, and even Duke Kant, out of curiosity, came to see the brave maid who had sacrificed herself. But her condition was not good. When Yurko saw number 76, she had bruises all over her body. She was unable to move due to her broken right hand and left foot. "Sir," number 76 blinked her eyes and managed to summon up a smile, "Thank you for waiting for me." All of a sudden, he felt completely relieved. "I'm glad you came back." They then stayed in Evernight for another week until number 76 was in a stable condition. After that, they went to Deep Valley Town where they took a ship and left the northern region. In the following days, Yorko got to know what had happened to her after her departure. The Knights of Glow had caught up with her before the sunset. In order to gain her some time, she untied the reins of all the horses and spurred them to run in the opposite direction to stop the knights who were speeding up. At the same time, she had attempted to flee to the mountains on the roadside. After a short while, however, she had been stopped by a creek. Considering that she would die after being captured, she thus had ridden off the cliff that was 30 meters high. Luckily, there were branches and cane vines on both sides of the precipice, so she had smashed into pieces. However, during the long drop, her head bumped into the rock and bled. Her right hand and left foot were broken by the rocks that jutted out. By the time she had reached the stream, she had sunk into a coma. The knights stopped chasing, probably because they had not found a safe path leading downhill or they had thought she was dead. It had been midnight when she had woken up. She had used splashed chilling stream water to keep herself awake. Sometimes she had been able to catch several small fish and shrimps. 2 days later, fishermen around there had found her and saved her life. Hero could remove her pain, but could not cure her wounds. Now, they had to go to the western region and see whether there were witches who could cure her. Anyway, she's come back alive. Satisfied, Yorko stood in the wind at the bow. The ship sailed towards Neverwinter with its sails stirring in the air. Chapter 678, The New Orders of the Fjords. A long-lost guest was ushered into Neverwinter on the end of the autumn twilight. She was the businesswoman, Margaret. Roland had prepared an extremely high-standard courtesy for the friend who was the first to come on board and brought generous returns to Border Town during its difficult time. She was not only welcomed by the First Army's cannon firing, but Roland had come to Shallow Beach to welcome her in person. "That's very kind of you, Your Majesty," Margaret smiled and said, "I'm simply an ordinary businesswoman." "The Western region wouldn't be so developed today without your help," Roland said in ease. "Neverwinter will never let such a friend down." Margaret's Chamber of Commerce was a great help in both the initial acquisition of a large amount of food and also in leasing ships to transport the refugees in the later days. Even Theo had depended on Margaret's network and support to gain a firm foothold in the Old King's City. Although these were not provided free of charge, Roland was very clear that many things could not be done with only the money. "It's my honor to be your friend," Margaret slightly bowed and said, "other than to fulfill the previously signed perfume contract. I brought you a new business opportunity this time." She pointed to her back and said, "They're the most popular businessmen in the fjords and they're very interested in the plan of the steam-powered boat." "Really?" Roland smiled. "Would you please give me a brief introduction later?" According to his usual practice, eating and talking was the way to deal with the businessmen. The long table in the living room was filled with a variety of delicious food, and the overseas visitors seemed to be particularly happy without eating fish. They had been trying to control themselves and behave as elegantly as possible, as noble etiquette was not popular in the fjords, but after a few drinks, the imitated etiquette was gone as the atmosphere was increasingly heated. Roland did not really care about this, as he preferred a lively dining environment as opposed to the complicated dining rules in the palace. He also had a brief understanding of the visiting business group through the chit-chatting session. Other than Gammon and Marlene, who first came to visit Border Town, there was also the Chamber of Commerce from Sunset Island and Shallow Water Town. Both of the islands in the south and the north next to Crescent Moon Bay formed a closely connected business circle. Although the 3 islands were not very big in size, they held the most population and power as the first residential area in the fjords. Besides, it was very competitive among them, as could be seen from the size and scale of their ships. Each of the three-masted ships parked at the dock of Shallow Beach could carry around 300 people and cargoes of similar weight. The price of such sailing ships was around 5,000 gold royals each, excluding the sailors. It was obvious that both of the Chamber of Commerces did not want to fall behind Crescent Moon Bay in the competition of respect and power. After the desserts were served, it was time for the official discussion. Margaret mentioned that you want to purchase steam engine? Yes, Your Majesty. Nibelung, the person in charge of Shallow Water Town's Chamber of Commerce, was the first to speak. However, other than the steam engine, we also hope to own a steam-powered boat like the one you sold to Crescent Moon Bay. I heard that the modification fee you previously quoted was 1,800 gold royals, and Sunset Island is willing to pay an extra 200 gold royals to modify 5 ships at the price of 2,000 gold royals each. Attire, the businessman from Sunset Island, said as he was unwilling to be left behind. Sunset Island's Chamber of Commerce can pay half of the deposit up front. They were apparently referring to the paddle steamer that Crescent Moon Bay purchased a year ago, which was an almost obsolete technology to Roland. However, it would be a very cost-effective transaction to him, as he could train the workers with this order while earning a good amount of money. It'll take 2 to 3 months to build a paddle steamer, and it'll take around a year to build 5 ships. Barav, the City Hall director, will sign the contract with you if you can accept that. That's not a problem at all. However, Sunset Island has a small request. Attire cleared his throat and said, "We hope you can hire the craftsmen from the fjords to build the ship." What do you mean? Roland lifted his eyebrows and asked. It's just like the steam engine factory of Crescent Moon Bay. We'll provide you with a group of craftsmen, and the ships they build will be first used by Sunset Island, and then they can choose whether to leave or stay after the completion of 10 years. Shallow Water Town also hopes to sign the same contract, Nibelung added. 5 sailing ships are only for the first order. There'll be at least 5 ships to construct every year after that if you agree with our request. I see, Roland thought, so, this is a big order which lasts for 10 years, in which every completed transaction each year costs up to 10,000 gold royals. Additionally, they won't be controlled by others after 10 years, as they'll have learned the detailed construction method by then. In fact, he did not mind to spread this method at all. The paddle steamer was apparently outdated as compared to the steam turbine that was under development, along with the triple expansion steam engine that was already in production. His initial purpose of signing a 10-year contract with Crescent Moon Bay, rather than to prevent the technology leaking out, was for the craftsmen to adapt to the life of the western region, and afterwards, they would refuse to return to the fjords and become a member of Neverwinter. It was just a seemingly beautiful castle in the air apart from the industry-based technology. Thinking about it, Roland knocked on the table and said, "There's no problem in principle, but there could be some amendments needed on the details, such as changing the 10-year duration to 5 years. Speaking of it, both of the 2 businessmen looked extremely happy about it. It was an even better choice for them if they could master the construction method of the steam-powered boat earlier. I can even give a 20% discount on the price if Shallow Water Town and Sunset Island are willing to let the craftsmen stay in the western region. What do you think?" This. Both of them immediately hesitated, as it was difficult to train a craftsman. However, it was hard for them to determine if it was a cost-effective deal for reducing the duration to 5 years with a few hundreds of people and an additional annual saving of 2,000 gold royals. "Your Majesty, may I answer you later after I discuss it with the others in the Chamber of Commerce?" Nibelung asked. "Yes." Of course, Roland made a gracious hand gesture and said, "Please excuse me temporarily." Attire subsequently left the living room. So, he shifted his gaze to Gammon and Marlene and said, "Are you not here for the steam-powered boat?" The representatives of Crescent Moon Bay had been very calm when both the Chamber of Commerce was fighting to be the first to discuss the business. They only occasionally talked about their previous business with Border Town, and it felt like they were not here for business but casual chit-chatting. Such actions had raised Roland's curiosity. "No, Your Majesty. We're also here for the steam-powered boat." Gammon took a sip of the white liquor and said, "But not the wooden paddle steamer." Crescent Moon Bay wants the indestructible steel ship that can split the storm, just like the one you built for Sir Thunder. Margaret's look immediately changed after hearing this. Chapter 679, A Generous Return. Your Majesty, I absolutely did not disclose the information conferred between you and Sir Thunder to anyone, she quickly explained. I know, Roland waved and looked at Gammon with great interest. Where did you hear about this? Although he did not regard the matter as confidential, it was almost impossible for the outsider to know about the steel ship as there were still a couple more months to go until it was fit to launch. Plus, only the bottom of the hull was completed at the moment and it was built in a totally enclosed shipyard. All the workers they had selected were the most skillful local residents. They would have to pay special attention if any locals were secretly in contact with the fjords. It's big news in fjords that Sir Thunder is recruiting new crews and that the campaign is on a much bigger scale than any of the recruitments in the past. It isn't a surprise that many people from fjords have joined his team since there are many outstanding captains in Crescent Moon Bay. Gammon said with a smile, the news regarding the magical steel ship also came from Thunder. He must take some hard measures to dispel the concerns of others about an in-depth exploration of the ocean to the west of Shadow Islands. How many people know about this? Not many, Your Majesty. The captain would not have revealed anything to us if he didn't receive a great help from Crescent Moon Chamber of Commerce earlier. After all, Sir Thunder is a lot more highly respected than us businessmen. I see, Roland nodded, however, I can't meet your demand since we cannot build a second ship in a short time as this kind of ship is extremely hard to build. We understand, Your Majesty, Marlene said, we're just hoping that you can sell the second steel ship to us after you complete the transaction with Sir Thunder. Crescent Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce is willing to pay 10% deposit up front and we'll pay 40% of the remaining once the project starts. They have already started to talk about the deposit before they even know the price. Roland once again realized the fjords people's adventurous spirit. Perhaps they smelled the great potential of the ship much faster than any ruler of the Four Kingdoms. At least, he had never seen any great nobles who would pay a high price for something he had never seen before. The city of Neverwinter also needs more than one steel ship, so it'll be 2 or 3 years later by the time the shipyard has time to build you one. Roland slowly said, have you not considered to send your craftsmen to participate in the construction and sign a new 10-year or 5-year contract? That might speed up the construction process, and you can also learn the relevant techniques. You're kidding me, Gammon felt a little embarrassed and said, we absolutely don't mean to covet it. We won't dare to ask for such techniques. With a steel ship like this, you can definitely become the most popular partner in the Fjord Islands, provided that it's really like what Sir Thunder described. I'm not kidding. Roland took a sip of the drink and shrugged. It was their turn to be shocked this time. After a moment, Gammon said in disbelief, you mean, you're willing to disclose the technologies to the Crescent Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce? As long as you can provide enough craftsmen, as I need not only blacksmiths and carpenters but apprentices as well, Roland replied without hesitation. I'll need 2,000 of them. You can recruit literate civilians to make up the number if you don't have that many. You need to provide the laborers within 5 years. In that case, we'll start the ship construction next year. Of course, you'll still bear the expenses incurred on shipbuilding. I really don't know what you're thinking, Your Majesty, Gammon said with a wry smile. Perhaps it's not your most valuable technology just yet? Roland shook his head and said, the steel ship I'm building for Thunder is the most cutting-edge technology that the city of Neverwinter has so far. He was not making a fool of himself. So far was indeed no exaggeration at this point of time. Who knew what would happen 5 or 6 years later? Then, why are you, Gammon startled. Then he waved with resignation and said, no, I'd better not ask. The Crescent Moon Bay is willing to make the deal. Why? Since the development of technologies could not be achieved without a foundation, not to mention those of ship construction. Fjords would not have enough manpower to maintain this huge industry, even if they were given mines, machines, and converters. When the first steam engine was introduced, the manufacturing industry could no longer be copied by a pair of skilled hands or a hammer. Roland could not help but remember the answer of the Black Sea shipyard director when he was asked about the need of Varieg's construction. It needs the Central Party Committee, the State Planning Commission, the Military Industrial Commission and 9 commissions of industry for national defense. Although steel ships were not so highly demanded, it was also the result of the entire city of Neverwinter's joint production. Other than the core power parts and hull welding work that Anna was in charge of, the remaining parts had been distributed in batches to the assembly plant and processed by the common people. It would be an inevitable trend of industrial development. Therefore, he needed more manpower to achieve his goal rather than protecting the technologies from being stolen. The population of the city of Neverwinter was increasing drastically, but it was not fast enough for Roland. However, he did not need to explain this to a businessman. The man would eventually understand 5 years later. What a wise choice. The steel ship will not let you down. Roland lifted the glass and said, "Cheers." "Cheers, what?" "It means drink up the wine in a gulp for celebration," he calmly explained. The new etiquette of the King's City. Well, really? In this case, cheers. Both of the businessmen from Crescent Moon Bay were forced to drink up the white wine in their glasses. After a while, Nibelung and Atayir also returned to the living room and agreed to sign the contract. As a result, the city of Neverwinter received the biggest order they ever had. It included a renovation deposit of 4,000 gold royals. The remaining 4,000 gold royals would be paid upon the completion of the construction, and a prepayment of 5,000 gold royals for the construction, both of which would be received by the end of the year. There would also be a total price set out according to the subsequent construction progress. He could already imagine Barev's grinning face. Once City Hall had such great revenues, they would be financially more capable of arranging a job for every citizen. Nibelung changed the topic after they had reached an agreement of the business. "Your Majesty, we also heard that there are a lot of perfumes for sale here other than the ships. I wonder. Miss Margaret had signed a contract with me 6 months ago. She'll be my sales representative and will be responsible for the sale of perfumes in the Fjord Islands after we open the shallow beach port. So, you should talk to her instead if you want to buy perfumes." Roland added after seeing his regretful expression. However, the city of Neverwinter is also preparing to promote a brand new merchandise. Perhaps you will be interested. At these words, he clapped his hands, and the guard who was on duty outside the hall quickly came in with 3 glass bottles. The bizarre color of the clear liquid in the bottles immediately caught the businessman's attention. Chapter 680, The Joint Chamber of Commerce. "What's it? A new fruit wine?" Margaret curiously asked. "If it's just a fruit wine, it won't be as easily sold as the perfumes," Nibelung shook his head and said. "That may not be the case," Gammon said while looking at the glass bottle with interest, "not to mention the contents of the bottle, simply the unique container is worth several gold royals." "Is this a new product of Alchemist Workshop of the King's City?" Marlene added, "I've never seen such a big crystal glass bottle before." The appearance isn't important, and the key lies within the product itself. Roland did not know whether to laugh or cry for a moment, as he did not expect these businessmen to be interested in the glass bottles first. The total cost of the colorless glass vessels was low, as all it needed was to master the formula. However, he did not sell only the glass vessels, as all the glasses produced in the city of Neverwinter was to supply for the chemical laboratory, perfume plant, and beverage plant. It's called Chaos Drinks as it's chaotic and unpredictable, just like the name. Each of them is a unique treat. He cleared his throat and pretended to be mysterious. "I bet you've never tasted the same taste. You may try it if you don't believe it." All 3 bottles of drinks were carefully selected by Roland from Evelyn's Beverages warehouse. They not only had their own characteristics, but 2 of the bottles had also been specially processed. One of the bottles was iced, which was freezing cold and pleasantly cooling. The other bottle was added with dry ice, which could be described as the world's first carbonate beverages. All the 5 merchants looked astonishing after taking a sip of it, as Roland expected. How exactly was it brewed? Atayir smacked his lips. "Those fruit wine has an indescribable taste as compared to the others. Looking at this cup of green apple juice, it's still gushing air. Oh God, is it breathing? Apple? Even honey isn't so sweet. The businessmen were each expressing their views while the toasting did not stop. They were continuously drinking until the 3 bottles were empty. Gammon licked his lips as if he could not get enough of it. Your Majesty, your chaos drinks are fantastic. Do you think it'll have a market if it was sold as a merchandise? Of course. The businessman from Crescent Moon Bay said without thinking, there may be a slight difference in the popularity of the 3 drinks, considering the difference of personal tastes, but they definitely are all rare wines. I bet no one will be interested in the top-grade fruit wine from the Kingdom of Dawn anymore after tasting these wines. You're pretty honest. Roland could not help but smile. Most businessmen would pick the flaws to keep their prices down if they wanted to buy the goods. Such straightforward praise was very rare. I don't dare to deceive your Majesty, and I don't want to lie to my tongue. Gammon paused for a moment and said, but I don't quite understand one thing. Tell me about it. Why would you give it such a weird name? He picked up the iced empty bottle which had a thin whore on it. For example, this can be called deep sea icing. I can assure you that it'll appear on every banquet in the summer. I think that bottle of numbing, green-colored drink can be called Romana. The feeling of numerous fish eggs hatching on the tongue is really memorable, Marlene added. I think so, too. Margaret laughed. Although the word chaos sounds very novel, it can't highlight their distinct characteristics. It'll sell better if you name it separately. Roland pretended to be regretful and said, unfortunately, these drinks are a unique enjoyment. In fact, these 3 bottles are the last stock. Do you mean, they're no longer brewed? Yes, I can't tell you the process of brewing chaotic drinks. However, the end result is always changing and their only common point is that they're all very tasty. That's why I named it chaos and the quantity reduced with every mouth taken. The crowd took a deep breath at the same time and everyone showed an unbelievable look. The scarcity was valuable and these items had an excellent quality of uniqueness. It could definitely bring the fjords, and even the 4 kingdoms a trend. Gammon was the first to speak. Your Majesty, please let me be your agent for this. The Crescent Moon Bay fleet is spread across the coast of the 4 kingdoms and only we can bring you the most generous returns. Crescent Moon Bay's maritime trading center has always been in the Kingdom of Dawn. When was the Everwinter trade route expanded? The representative of Shallow Water Town Chamber of Commerce interrupted. Attire quickly added, the merchant ships that head to the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter are mostly from Sunset Island. You're deceiving His Majesty. Roland stretched his arms out and interrupted the arguments of the 3. In this case, let's set up a joint chamber of commerce. Joint Chamber of Commerce? Yes, participants need to sit down and negotiate the area they're responsible for, and the city of Neverwinter is solely responsible for delivering the goods in order to avoid malicious competition to bring down the price. He described the concept of regional agency as clearly as possible. You can plan for the division according to your own strength as all of you have a long-established business and your own familiar selling towns. In this case, you can quickly sell the goods and won't have to compete with the peers. The final income of sales will be divided according to the proportion of the contract. As a result, everyone involved will be protected. The businessmen quickly understood the simple principle. Sounds good, but how to determine the specific area and division ratio? The beverages sent to the Kingdom of Everwinter and the beverages sold in the fjords would have a huge costs difference. The cost of transportation is definitely something to consider, and there are also manpower costs, selling prices, product output, etc. In general, agents with the highest costs will receive an extra credit due to the limited supply. The details of the provisions will definitely need to be gradually discussed to all parties' satisfaction. It looked like it was decreasing the total income at the first glance. However, without malign competition, their profits would be much higher with the strengths of the 3 chambers of commerce. A lot of the products from the city of Neverwinter had so far only been consumed internally by the convenience market due to the lack of sales channels. The businessmen from the fjords who built their fortunes by selling merchandises were the best channels for Roland. It was undoubtedly the most economical way for him to provide them the merchandises to be sold to every corner of the mainland in the future. I'm willing to join. Margaret was the first to show her support. The others also wanted to give it a try after seeing her declaration. Roland smiled and said, "Rest assured, cooperating is always more powerful than standing alone. This will be a win-win situation for everyone as long as we work together."